Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined, as always, by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him fixing his jacket and on Twitter at Tilt Money, and also joined by Kendall Mursky. You can find him on Twitter at Mursky Kendall. Together, we are the Bills guys. This is the Air Raid Hour presented by the Cover One Sports Network. And listen, gentlemen, some breaking news, big announcement today. I just want to announce that this will be my last show for a while. I have been suspended 1 year by the Cover One Network. They found me guilty of actually wagering money on the number of times I would mispronounce a name during a show. I would always bet the over, and I would always win. So now I have to pay my punishment. Kendall is going to be taking my spot for the next year or so, obviously.
I want to know who was taking the other side of that bet.
Definitely not Vegas.
Yeah, I think the Calvin Ridley news is the biggest news that came out of the NFL today. Yeah. What are the Patriots going to do now? I feel so bad for the Patriots. I don't know what they're going to do at wide receiver now with all the Patriots fans just assuming Calvin Ridley was going to New England. That's going to be rough for them. But I'll tell you what, the other big news that maybe is Bills related today is in the Monday morning quarterback from Albert Breer. There was a nice little nugget in there in which Albert Breer said that a big name, finger quotes, big name, this is according to Albert Breer, veteran free agent, reached out to the Bills while they were in Indianapolis, set up a meeting while they were in Indianapolis, and if the two sides can come to an agreement, that big name free agent might be joining the Buffalo Bills when free agency starts. That is a news story that tickled my interest, and I want to lead off today's show, even though our show is going to be mostly reactions to the Combine. This happened at the Combine, so I guess we're reacting to something that happened to the Combine, but it was a interesting tidbit when I read it. The number one thing I thought to myself was, isn't that tampering? So that's going to be something that we need to address here in a second, but Dave, what were your thoughts on this story here that Albert Breer posted, this nugget from his story that he posted about the Bills meeting with a veteran free agent who reached out to them? Any idea of who you think it might possibly be?
Well, I'll just say this, look how far we've come, right? I mean, from the Bills being known, or Buffalo really as a city being known as not a destination for free agents. And would you say it's fair to say the aura or the mantra around the Bills getting any kind of big time free agents in the past was you had to overpay to get them to come here? I think we all kind of agree that was the prevailing thought. I will say I was racking my brain on this and trying to figure out, okay, let me read between the lines here. Big name reaching out to Buffalo, maybe someone who is at the tail end of their career looking for kind of a 1 year deal. And then I was thinking, well, is it going to be an offensive player or is it a defensive player? And I was thinking, well, would it really be a defensive player? Because I don't know that someone would really know what kind of holes this team's going to have on defense, but there is something to be said about wanting to play with Josh Allen, right? As a quarterback. And so that's why I kind of lean towards it was probably an offensive player. And I think we all agree the obvious name is probably Gronk, right? One of the obvious names is probably Gronk, right? Brady's retired. Gronk's a free agent. He's a big name. I mean, whatever you want to say about him, he's only 32, same age as Travis Kelce, and still put up a really nice season last year with Brady. That's a name that I could see him being interested, obviously, from the area. And I don't know how much that weighs into it. And I'm sure you guys are going to bring up another guy who's from the area that could be a big name coming. but Gronk to me seems like that could fit the story, right?
And it does too, because he had those conversations with the Bills last year. So it seems like maybe Gronk in this situation, it sort of seems like possibly if it is Gronk picks up the phone and be like, hey, remember when we were kind of talking about a deal last year and I decided I was going to go back and run it back again with Brady? Well, Brady's gone. Maybe we should revisit this. Are you still interested? I know Dawson Knox had a good year. So that it could easily, I could see that situation being Gronk. Kendall, do you see it possibly going any other way? Someone mentioned it in the comment section. Jay Davis, CBS Sports reported that, and this is again weird because I need to figure out what the tampering rules are. Maybe if maybe if a team gives a player permission, they're allowed to, but the report from CBS was Allen Robinson and his agent were in Indianapolis and we're talking to teams because Allen Robinson is actually, I believe, coming off of an injury. So maybe it's Allen Robinson wanting to play with Josh Allen, who knows, but Kendall, where are you leaning here? Was it Allen Robinson, somebody else?
I'm definitely in Tilt's camp where I'm thinking if a free agent is tampering legally or not, they want to come to Buffalo because of Josh Allen. Yeah, this was funny, Craig. But yeah, I think it's going to be an offensive guy. Someone that's trying to do this is vying to play with Josh Allen. Like you said, Judge, there are some holes on this defense, but it's not as apparent and obvious because the way that defense is played, it's nickel base. We know these guys are going to be on the field. We know there's some young guys stepping up for the free agents in the edge room. So it's not like obvious that an edge guy would just get a ton of snaps, even if it is the other guy from Western New York, which I'll leave for you, Judge.
That's
but but I think the possibilities are definitely Gronk. I think that Allen Robinson thing definitely has some legitimacy to it, especially like the rumor side of it. There is something there. Same thing with the Gronk stuff. And then another one that's kind of in the same window is Christian Kirk. We've seen Christian Kirk has been hanging out with Josh Allen this offseason, albeit it was probably just one dinner, but hey, they hung out.
It was a whole vacation. I think they rented a house.
Oh, it was?
Together. Oh, yeah.
Well, that's huge news for me. Either way, man. I mean, the whole thing, I kind of poo-pooed it early on because I was like, how are the Bills going to free up this money and all that stuff? Are they really going to do this? And then obviously the Cole Beasley trade stuff comes out and it's like, oh, maybe, we could find some money in the banana stand that way. And then Christian Kirk can come in. Allen Robinson could come in, whoever it is. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting, flipping the coin on the other side from where we've been in the past decade where, we had to overpay lots of guys to come to Buffalo.
Yeah, it's, obviously the Chandler Jones connection. I was messaging back and forth with Nate Geary of WGR 550, and we were having a conversation when this came out, and I was like, Chandler Jones? And he was saying that, he was here. Hopefully I'm not breaking like a DM code here. Nate, if you're listening, just let me know in the DMs if I'm breaking a DM code here. But he was like, I'm here and Chandler Jones wants to cash in. I live out here in Arizona. Arizona Cardinals fans have soured on Chandler Jones. They feel like he's in it for the sacks at behest of his defensive assignments, especially in the run game. He's been sort of a little bit, toxic with some of the Arizona Cardinal fans on social media, sort of a me first type of guy. A lot of guys out here in Arizona, a lot of fans out here in Arizona soured on Chandler Jones. So I don't know if this is a situation where Chandler Jones will reach out to Buffalo, who would have to actively work to free up money to pay him. I don't see Chandler Jones taking like $7 million in the first year and having there be like money in the third or fourth year that he'll never actually touch. I think Chandler Jones is going to want his bag early on in the deal. So I don't know if it's really Chandler Jones. You mentioned Christian Kirk because of his relationship with Josh Allen. I like that idea. The reports came out this week that there's 4 or 5 teams that are going to be interested. He can get up to 13, 14 million AAV. But if he really wants to play for Josh Allen, maybe he takes a discount. Yeah. Maybe those other teams that are in on him aren't very competitive, right? Like, why go to a team without a good quarterback? Right. You saw the Owosu report come out this week that the Bills might be interested in pursuing Owosu. Maybe it could be anyone from that 2018 pre-draft class that built a relationship with the Buffalo Bills by coming to Orchard Park and, doing a visit. Guys like Dante Jackson would be in that list as well. Allen Robinson, Rashad Penny. But now it's like, are these guys veterans? So to me, it comes down to Allen Robinson, who I think might have brought his agent and met with multiple teams with quarterbacks, right? Yeah. And was like, all right, I'm going to meet with these 4 or 5 teams in Indy. They all have named quarterbacks. I want to work out a 1-year deal, find the best situation for my client. He can go put up his numbers and then hit the free agent market again next year. Or, and this is really me grasping at straws here. Remember the comment that Brandon Beane made? Someone asked him, hey, Joe Shane has been taking all of your guys with him. And Brandon Beane joked, well, maybe we'll have to take one of theirs. It's not tampering if the player has been released. I don't know if this fits under big name category, but Kyle Rudolph, inline tight end.
That's not a big name anymore.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I like the idea, but I don't know if it's a big name.
Here's the thing. It's also Albert Breer's idea of what a big name is. So
you've been talking to Nate Geary too much of that Notre Dame love.
But no, I'm just saying, like, it's all like we're sitting here now on like our ninth
Gronk's
talking
big name.
about
Gronk's the obvious one, right? Like big name, coming home 1 year, probably gonna have. Yes. Well, I mean,
but this is also
Greg, is Gronk
Albert Breer's definition. This is Albert Breer's definition of a big name.
Gronk's a big name. Gronk's a big name.
Yeah, Gronk's a big name. Allen Robinson, I think, would be a big name.
Allen Robinson's a big
Chandler
name.
Jones is a big name.
But what do you guys think about Allen Robinson though as a fit? Like, is he too much like Diggs? Like, is he too much, or like, were we just like the dude's really good, so we'll take him?
No,
you know?
I think the thing is, if you can get another wide receiver that can adequately run routes and catch 50-50 balls and play in the slot and on the outside, it just makes everyone versatile enough where you don't know where anyone's going to line up and where you should send your cornerback.
He's never played with like a top echelon.
Never.
Either.
Honestly, he deserves to tamper illegally or legally. He deserves a quarterback. Really, he needs to find himself a good quarterback. He deserves
somebody. Yeah, because he went from Jacksonville to he went from Blake Bortles to whatever Mitch Trubisky and whatever they've been dealing with.
Hey,
he was good.
Trubisky, the man who's about to get his bag again, Mitch Trubisky. But anyway, that's about it on the free agent speak. We're going to get back to free agents on Thursday because the legal tampering period starts in literally 1 week from tonight. So the next time we talk to you, not the next time because we have a show on Thursday, but the next time we do a Monday show, we're going to be sitting here scrolling Twitter actively throughout the entire show, looking at Ben Albright and looking at Albert Breer and looking at all these different Adam Schefter, Ari Marov or whatever his name is, like My Sports Update. We're going to be like scrolling Twitter the entire time, looking for little nuggets of information about the legal tampering window. So next Monday show is when the live bullets start firing. So it's going to be really crazy. Such a condensed schedule now, jumping right from the combine to free agency. But tonight's the night where we close out the combine. We're going to go through position by position, and we're going to have a conversation about who made some money this week, who maybe rose up draft boards, who checked the boxes that needed to check the boxes, and who are some guys who maybe tanked their draft stock this week. And I'll tell you what, like I went through position by position. There weren't many people who had a bad week in Indy. Right. I mean, I could count on like one hand the number of people that maybe really hurt their chances in Indianapolis this week, or maybe hurt their draft stock in Indianapolis this week. It wasn't a lot of guys. So it should be really interesting. We're going to start with running backs. Obviously, I think Bryce Hall and Kenneth Walker sort of, checked the boxes that they needed to check. I saw a report, I believe it was from Tony Pauline, talked to an NFC executive that said, these are going to be the top two running backs drafted. They're both first-round caliber backs. They probably won't go in the first round just because of the value people put at that position. But he pretty much said that he believes Bryce Hall and Kenneth Walker are going to be the first two running backs off the board. Obviously, I think a guy like Isaiah Spiller, James Cook, etc., still in that sweepstakes. But Dave, I'm going to start with you. What running backs stuck out to you, whether it's because they surprised you or because they checked some boxes?
I think two guys that were kind of already getting some momentum and relative to like their sort of, I guess, round or projection. Rashad White is one for me. We've been talking about him a lot on this show for a couple weeks now. Smooth vision. Kendall had talked about that as being really important to him, the traits and the running backs he's looking for this year. But then he goes out and runs a 4.48 40, which to me was better than expected for him. I was expecting him to be kind of in that 4.5 to 4.6 range. But he ran under a 4.5 and that was impressive to me. So to go along with all of his other good traits that we had already known about, the vision, the smoothness, he showed some quickness, and he had a pretty damn high RAS score too. It was like 9.58 or 9.6 or something like that. So I think Rashad White acquitted himself well. I think that's something that could put him up into maybe day two. We'll see. And then the other guy was the guy that I mentioned last week, and I think we all kind of like him too, was Ty Chandler from UNC in my backyard. Ran under a 4.440, another huge RAS score for him, and ran faster than I was expecting for him. Now, he looks good on tape. He's quick on tape, but I wasn't sure about the long speed. The short area burst is there on tape when you watch him, but the long speed, and I know 40's not super long, but he was under 4.4. Yeah. So for me, those two guys kind of stood out as maybe helping their stock a little bit. I think Ty Chandler goes from being a borderline PFA to late day 3 to now firmly in the draftable running back conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. You mentioned late there, Ty Chandler. He didn't run, but Joshua Corbin's another guy who had a really good Shrine Bowl. Yeah. I almost felt like there are more guys that I'm falling in love with from the Shrine Bowl this year than there is the Senior Bowl. And I'm trying to be nice on Twitter. I'm not trying to be the jerk that I used to be. I'm trying to reform myself. I've stopped myself from making snarky comments about how Jim Nagy needs to step up his game. But I swear, some of these Shrine Bowl guys showed up the Senior Bowl guys, both at the combine and sort of in the pre-draft process so far. I'm seeing more Shrine guys that I'm falling in love with. So Eric Galko stepping up his game. Jim Nagy, you got to step up your game, because I think some of the guys that he invited to the Senior Bowl this year, I was just kind of like, what? And then some of these Shrine Bowl guys really stepped up and have played well.
But how nice is it? And we mentioned this before, how nice is it what the NCAA has done with these exhibition games to really put these guys in the spotlight, right? Making these games meaningful, making them worth something for these guys to play. And they're more meaningful almost to play in these than their bowl games, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Some of the guys who really popped in Shrine Bowl week, Jelani Woods, who we're going to get to when we talk about tight ends. Claude Please comes in at the perfect time saying Jelani Woods. Timing. So, it's going to be really interesting. Kendall, who are some guys that stuck out to you in Indianapolis at the running back position this week?
Judge, you stole some of my guys. I won't lie, but I guess I'll go on the other side. I know, but there's a lot to talk about here. I'm going to go on the other side of the coin, where you're talking about, the guys that check some boxes. I'm going to talk about some guys that kind of left some boxes unchecked. I think we went into this combine assuming Tyler Algier would run faster than he did based off all those reports about how fast he was running and all that stuff. And I thought there were times on tape watching him that he had some breakaway speed, but I think a lot of that was due to light boxes and good vision, less than just breaking away from people and destroying pursuit angles. And he came away with a 4.640. So, I mean, yeah, you can work with that. If, he runs powerfully, he runs with good toughness. You can work with that. You can make up for it in other areas. But when you're advertised to run faster than that, it's disappointing. So that's someone who's definitely falling down my board a little bit. Not necessarily because of the combine, but because that is unchecked. That was something I had a question about, and he didn't answer it in a positive way. And someone in a very similar light is Kyron Williams. I liked a lot of the stuff he did on tape, like a lot. That he had that breakaway touchdown grab where he was operating out of the slot. I've seen it a ton on Twitter. And he catches the ball, he breaks tackle, and he runs down the field. No one catches him. But I wasn't thinking, no one's really competing with him on this play to go catch him. I can't really see a comparison of how fast he really is. And then he comes out and runs a 4.6540. And I'm just thinking, man, this dude is literally just a better pass catching, better pass blocking Devin Singletary. He knows how to make people miss. He has good contact balance. He has good vision. But is he ever going to be able to break away and make, consecutive 20-yard rushes and stuff like that? I think he's going to be a very productive but very meh player at the next level, and I don't know if we want to add another guy like that to the Buffalo running back room.
Yeah, it's almost like Kyron Williams now. It's like he's like 30-year-old Gio Bernard, right? Because Gio Bernard when he was drafted had some pop to his game. But as he got older as a player, he just became sort of that guy you can dump the ball out of the backfield and can pass block. Seems to be like what Kyron Williams' job in the National Football League is going to be, a guy, a third down back, right? Like a guy, maybe like a JD McKissick type. That seems to be like what, the box that Kyron Williams is going to have to fall into. Cause I don't I think he took his chance. I think he took his maybe type. Yeah. I think he took his day 2 chances and I think he shredded them. with that 40 and with some of his testing numbers and his measurables. I think he's now squarely in the 4th to 5th round range. I think you're going to see Kyron Williams drop a round or two. Some of the names that I liked, I thought Jerome Ford did himself some favors. He checked the box coming into 4.46. Two guys that I think went from later round picks or maybe UDFAs. Pierre Strong Jr. from South Dakota State. I'll tell you what, his 4.37 really popped. And a guy I wanted to ask you about, a guy who I think maybe went from a UDFA, like a priority free agent, to a guy who could maybe go in the 5th or the 6th round. Isaiah Pacheco from Rutgers. You've charted a lot of Rutgers games over the past year for SIS. Talk a little bit about Pacheco's game.
Yeah, Pacheco was an interesting guy when I was scouting him. I saw a lot of toughness in his running style. Very, very physical, very tough runner. He could pass block a decent amount. But when I watched him, I wasn't thinking, oh, wow, this dude really can make plays, make people miss, and run away from people. I thought he was someone who's kind of in a similar light to Dameon Pierce, where he's kind of one cut downhill violent runner. And I felt Pacheco was a very similar style to that. But then he comes out and he runs a sub 4.40, and I'm like, oh my God, I never saw this on tape. And I had to start going back into the tape and watching him. And I was like, really, really shocked to see that, because I don't want to say he plays slow, but I don't think he ever plays to a point where he can hit his top speed. Just the kind of offense that Rutgers was running, just a lot of like zone read stuff where he has to be patient and find the right gap before he can hit it with decisiveness. I felt like he needed a better offense to be showcased a little bit better than where he was at Rutgers. I thought he's a talented player, but you didn't really get to see it a lot. Also, he was in a pretty heavy rotation. I don't know if that has a lot to do with him or the system there at Rutgers under Greg Schiano. I don't know if he likes a running back rotation. But I thought he was good. And I think definitely with that 40 time, I wish the running backs ran some agility drills so we can actually compare them to one another. But I
have to wait for the pro day.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see that, because I didn't think he was overly shifty or elusive, but he could definitely make some people miss if he had to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he firmly grasped the day 3 selection, I think, with what he did at the combine on top of the tape.
Yeah, I mean, Zamir White had an impressive I have to go back and watch some more Zamir White. 5'11", 215 pounds, ran a 4.4 flat out of Georgia.
Yeah, that was shocking.
Obviously, James Cook is the guy who gets most of the pub there. Zamir White, I thought Zamir White was going to clock in at like a 4.55, 4.6. He goes and clocks a 4.4. That was super interesting to me. Brian Robinson, man, this is a guy who just has been growing on me. And it seems like every time I recalibrate my running back rankings, he moves up one spot. That's time. What
happened to me.
He moves up one spot. Like he's always moving up a spot. So that should be interesting. Bruzy asks here about Max Borge. Met with the Bills. I mean, he's just like a Rex Burkhead type. I wouldn't even be surprised if you could get him as a UDFA. 5'9", 210. Did not run a 40. Did 20 on the bench press, and that's the only workout he did. So he didn't really do many workouts in Indianapolis. But there is that little nugget that he met with the Bills. To me, Borge is nothing more than like a third down back. Reminds me a little bit of a guy that I liked a couple of years ago that the Rams got in Jake Funk from Maryland. So you gotta love those albino rhinos late in the draft. But that should just about do it for running back. Like I said, I don't know. Bryce Hall is my favorite running back in this class. Kendall, I want your thoughts on Bryce Hall, because I know he's not your number one running back. You got a guy like Isaiah Spiller. What is it about Bryce Hall, who, comparably speaking, like Raz-wise, body and comparables to a guy like Joe Mixon, right? I look at a Bryce Hall and I'm like, do the Buffalo Bills want to add Joe Mixon to this offense? Because they can, if they use their second round pick on Bryce Hall. You can literally add a Joe Mixon to this offense if you add Bryce Hall. What are your reservations with Bryce Hall?
Literally the only thing is pass blocking. That's literally the only thing. I didn't see it.
And Joe Mixon does come off on third down. We saw Samaje Ryan play a ton of that Super Bowl on third down.
It was literally the only thing. The reason I have Spiller ranked higher, and it's a flavor kind of thing at the end of the day between Spiller, Hall, and Walker for me. I like all three of them, but the thing that dropped Hall and Walker was insufficient pass blocking at times. Walker, in my opinion, he just kind of went low. He went for chop blocks a lot of the time, and he kind of sold out for that. And if it hit, it hit. If it didn't, he was screwed. And for that reason, he got a low grade for pass blocking, and that impacts his passing game impact. Same thing happened for Bryce Hall. Bryce Hall, on the other hand, is a much better pass catcher in terms of usage. Not saying Walker isn't. He just didn't really get the chance to show it at Michigan State. Hall is a great pass catcher. He has really good hands, solid route runner, and he can obviously do stuff after the catch. But his passing game impact was negatively affected because he couldn't pass block as well as I would have liked, especially for someone at his size. So that dropped his grade a little bit. Man, if the Bills drafted Hall or Spiller, I wouldn't be upset. It would come down to the round that they're drafted, obviously. But both of those guys, they're rather interchangeable for me. It's just, the way my formula is built. Hall came out below Spiller.
All right, let's shift now to wide receivers. And obviously, I'll let you guys talk about who some of your favorites were, but I'm going to steal the mic here for a second because three of my favorite guys throughout this sort of, as in the month of January, as I started organizing my list, as I was watching the Senior Bowl, watching the Shrine Bowl, trying to really hone in on some guys, there were three guys that I just kept coming back to. And these three guys not only checked boxes in Indies, I think they exceeded expectation in Indianapolis. Calvin Austin, at this point, we might have taken him at 57 if we want Calvin Austin. Mm-hmm. I know he's a smaller player, 5'7", 170, but comes in, clocks a 4.32. He's got an 8.99 RAS. He's despite his diminutive stature and his route running ability, which makes many people think he's going to be a slot receiver in the National Football League, and he certainly has the chops to do it. He did a ton of outside stuff at Memphis, and he was even successful with it despite his diminutive stature. Plus, he's got some return flex to his game. Calvin Austin absolutely killed it at the combine. I think he did more than check boxes. Khalil Shakir from Boise State. I've been comping him to Robert Woods since November. I love this guy's just his run blocking ability, his ability to, find holes in the zone over the middle. He's got some of the strongest hands in this draft class. That short area suddenness. I thought Khalil Shakir was going to run like a 4.5, 4.6. Like I was sitting there wincing when he was about to run the 40 because I thought his draft stock was going to tank. And Khalil Shakir comes out and runs a 4.43, has a 7.35 RAS.
I'm pretty upset by that, in all honesty,
because he's the third round pick now. Yeah. He's a third round. I mean, the only thing that you have to fall back on is it's such a damn deep wide receiver class. Mm-hmm. And like if someone reaches and takes Khalil Shakir, it's like, I guess we settle for John Mechie, right? Like, so right. It's such an absolutely deep wide receiver class, but Khalil Shakir is one of my favorite players far and away. He absolutely met those expectations. And then last but not least, the fastest man, at least at wide receiver in the combine, Taekwon Thornton. He's more than just a speed guy. When he gets to the National Football League, is he going to be that guy who runs in a straight line? Yes. But Taekwon Thornton with his 4.28 40, he's shown some really good contested catch. He's still raw. He's a track guy who started playing wide receiver, but he can sort of come in if the Buffalo Bills can get their hands on him in the 4th, 5th round and replace sort of Emmanuel Sanders and that stuff he did down the field while giving more responsibilities to Gabriel Davis. So I really like Taekwon Thornton and what he could become. That 4.28 speed is just not something that everybody has. So I'm a big fan of Taekwon Thornton, and it's more than just his blazing speed. I think he's got the ability to grow into more than that. So Shakir, Thornton, and Austin were my three favorites in the combine, far and away. They blew me away. They exceeded expectations. So I'm super pumped for those guys. Obviously, it stinks a little bit because, like you mentioned, their stock rises. But those are my three favorites at the combine. Dave, who are some of your favorites at the combine, or some guys that disappointed you?
Yeah, I mean, those guys were all, Austin was phenomenal. Definitely one of my favorites too. It's funny because we talked about how deep this like wide receiver class was even for round one, right? You could see 6, 7, 8 guys going. And now it's like what you thought was maybe a semblance of an order, you could see them going, has kind of been now turned on its head, I feel like, after the combine, at least in my mind. Some guys have gone up, some guys have gone down. It's pretty obvious to me that Garrett Wilson, in my mind, has kind of helped his case with his combine results. 4.38 40. I didn't expect him to run that fast. A pretty reasonable RAS score, I think, there between a 7 and an 8. And so I think Garrett Wilson acquitted himself well. And he was one of those guys, like we were saying before we came on the air, made me go back and watch a little bit more of him after seeing what he did at the combine. And know Anthony Prohaska has done a lot more looking into him as well. And so he's a guy that acquitted himself well. How could I not mention my dude Velus Jones, all of our dudes, Velus Jones, 4.31 40, the nearly 9 RAS score. I mean, what can you say? Like, we had high hopes for him going into the weekend.
Daniel Jeremiah, mid-combine, comped him to Andre Roberts.
I loved that
6 to midnight when he made that.
I think yeah, I mean, it's a fair comp right now, but I would say Velus Jones has better receiving chops, than I should say this. He has a chance to be a better receiver than Andre Roberts.
Potential.
And Andre Roberts did.
He flashed some potential as a receiver.
Early in his career, he had some moments where he flashed with the Cardinals. But I mean, Velus Jones with that 4.31, I mean, more than check the boxes for me. One guy I'll say that some people will say hurt his cause. Some people may say he just checked the boxes. I will say he didn't really do anything to hurt his cause. I think guys around him that maybe outperformed, maybe knocked him down a little, and that was Jahan Dotson. I know he didn't have the best RAS score, but he still ran the 4.43, and he still looked really smooth, right, running his routes out there. So while Jahan Dotson kind of, I think, maybe stayed in neutral a bit with the combine, other guys may have, gone ahead of him. Who knows? Maybe, like we're talking about, maybe a guy like Jahan Dotson now,
pick 57.
Is there a chance he gets there at 57? There's a chance. There's a chance.
Because you made that point. Like, Jahan Dotson didn't do anything to hurt his stock. People were like, Jahan Dotson, he's a smaller guy. He's a burner. He's not a natural burner.
It's just that other guys,
But Skye Moore had a really good combine. People might look at Skye Moore, they might look at Jahan Dotson, and they might go for what they think is more potential in Skye Moore. Christian Watson, that big ball of clay, could go ahead of Jahan Dotson. So as you have Christian Watson creeping up, as you have Skye Moore creeping up, as you have Calvin Austin creeping up, if some of these NFL GMs decide to go one way instead of the other way, in Jahan Dotson, who says Jahan Dotson go up and get the ball. Yeah, he's Deontay Johnson. Like, that was a really good comp. Or Brandon Cooks. That's another good comp. 2 very good receivers in the National Football League who I think Jahan Dotson compares really well to. If he starts sniffing the 40s, Brandon Beane, you start getting on the phone and making a call if you don't pull the trigger on a wide receiver at 25. If you can pull Jahan Dotson in the second round, that's an absolute steal. If you can get him somewhere between pick like 45 and 50, an absolute steal. So Kendall, who are some guys that you like or liked, or some guys that disappointed you?
Well, I mean, I think everyone's in this boat with Treylon Burks, where he disappointed them. And I think at the end of the day, everyone who's kind of trying to compare him to like the DK Metcalfs of the world, this dude who's just big, physical wide receiver who can run fast, but also how he was used at Arkansas, it's very intriguing because he was used in a quasi tight end role. He was used in a way where he could be a gadget guy. He was also used on the outside. So it's all very intriguing. But then when you look at his numbers, it's like, this dude is a smaller, he's a slower, he's an equally as poor agile, and he's a less explosive DK Metcalf. Yet people are talking about drafting him higher than DK Metcalf. I don't know if that has to do with the neck concerns coming out of college for DK, but like, I mean, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of intrigue with Treylon Burks, but I think with the way he performed, I don't think there's any reason teams should take a chance on that in the first round. I think every team should think about it in the second round because he is very intriguing. I think he's like, if he's there at 57, I don't think this happens, but if he's there at 57, I'm back in. You know what I mean? I'm fully out on the idea at 25, but at 57, the potential is there. There is something to work with. And yes, there are some concerns about the explosiveness, the fact that he is 6'2" and he's pretty thick and he can't really even high jump and go get the ball with that 33-inch vertical. So there are concerns in that way.
I'm being dead serious when I don't even think Treylon Burks is on the Bills board.
I can see that too.
Because some of the things that you hear about Treylon Burks, takes plays off, not the crispest route runner, all of these different things. Like those are the knocks on Treylon Burks. When you look at scouting report after scouting report, when the ball's not going his way, he's half-assing it. He's not the crispest of route runners, despite the fact that, he's been in college and he's had a chance to work on his route running game for a while now. So he's more athlete than maybe football player or more athlete than wide receiver. So you can look at those raw traits and be like, yeah, I can turn that into something. And some other people might look at it and be like, how is there no refinement to his game when he's been in college for, 2, 3, 4 years? So I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Treylon Burks is someone the Bills have no interest in, because you saw at the combine, they talked to Garrett Wilson, they talked to Jameson Williams, and then they did extensive board work with Chris Olave, very crisp route runner, and Jahan Dodson, another guy who has got a lot of refinement to his game. The two guys that the Bills zeroed in on, it seems like they zeroed in on at the combine, Olave and Dodson, are the two guys where if you would have asked me to pick the two guys of the 5 that I thought the Bills would have the most interest in, those are probably the two I would have picked, because they seem more like process guys, maybe so than a Treylon Burks. But what do you think, Kendall, about David Bell's 4.65? I like David Bell as a player. He's out of he's out of day 2 of the draft, right? Like he's not a guy, I think, that with his 4.65 40 and then terrible agility drills, he finished with a RAS of let me pull this up here for
2.72.
2.72. Like this guy played his way out of being a consensus day 2 pick, correct? Like I understand the tape is more important than the combine, but this guy was such a piss poor athlete that it's going to be hard to justify using a first, second, or third round pick on him, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the third round is still very much in play because of, the tape. If he shows it on tape and he shows it against good competition, then you can work with all of this stuff. We talk about the Bills' strength and conditioning, all that stuff. I mean, yeah, these numbers, they have a cap. Like David Bell might never eclipse 35 inches on his vertical where he tested at 33, but you can get some more out of that with NFL training and conditioning. So I don't think you should write him off as the athlete, because it matters more what he does with pads on. And that speaks to like the first comment in our room when we hopped in here. Someone was like, why do we even care about these 40 times? It matters what they do on the football field. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's David Bell. That's literally what we're talking about when we talk about David Bell. If he can do it on tape, then this stuff is just a piece of the puzzle, and it does push him down boards, but it doesn't take him off boards. And for all we know, this is the guy of this draft this year, where we're looking at that video of Brandon Beane talking about hoping Gabe Davis runs a slow 40. David Bell could be that guy. So you can't take him off the board for that reason. If he plays fast, if he plays agile, if he plays explosive, none of this stuff matters as much.
Just going through some of the last names I have on here, some guys. Trey Turner did himself no favors at the combine, coming in with a 2.38 RAS. His vertical at 27 was awful. Kyle Phillips, maybe we should have a conversation about Kyle Phillips here. A guy who's supposed to be a speed slot, coming in with a 4.52 RAS, a 4.58 40. That was rather not so intriguing in terms of Kyle Phillips. I think there was a lot of people who wanted to have Kyle Phillips in like the third round conversation. I think
I liked him.
I still like him. I just don't know if you can use a day 2 pick on it. Like if you would have came out and blazed like a 4.40, so people would have been like, oh, Kyle Phillips, third round, like 4.58 is like, yeah, back to the 4th, 5th for you, Danny Gray had a good combine. Reggie Roberson, not so much, didn't run the 40, but a 29-inch vert. That's concerning for me. Not so great in those sort of, those burst drills there. Kevin Austin Jr. and Isaiah Weston made themselves some money at the combine, both 9+ RASes. And then the last one I wanted, Alec Pierce, obviously made a lot of money. His vert was insane, 40-inch vert to go along with that.
Former volleyball player, you'd hope so.
Yeah. I sort of laughed at this one, but when they were about to start doing the wide receiver drills, and he didn't do any of the 3-cone or the shuttle or anything. So maybe he'll shut me up at his pro day. But the way Daniel Jeremiah was talking about Slade Bolden, I was like, is this dude going to come out here and light some shit up? Like, because he was like, yeah, Mac Jones and Slade Bolden, their freshman year at Alabama, were just, giving people fits from the scout team. And I'm like, oh shit, is Slade Bolden actually good? But then he comes out and gets a 1.37. So
rough weekend for Daniel Jeremiah, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Daniel Jeremiah did not have a good week. So it was, so Ron Beck says I'm putting too much stock into the combine. I'm not speaking about me personally. I'm talking about general managers in the National Football League. Like, not every general manager in the National Football League is as smart as Brandon Beane, right? Like we've seen those articles with Matthew Fairburn where Brandon Beane is like really married to the tape, and like he took Devin Singletary despite poor athletic testing. But you see some other GMs see a guy like Alec Pierce have himself the combine he did, and Alec Pierce to me is a 4th round pick. There might be a GM out there who sees Alec Pierce's testing numbers, start getting images of Cooper Kupp in their head, and pull the trigger in the 2nd round. Like there really are people in the National Football League who take this athletic testing too serious. There really is. And I think what we're doing here is we're trying to have a conversation. And I don't think saying a guy's draft, like David Bell went from a 3rd rounder to a 4th or a 5th rounder because of athletic testing is a crazy thing to say. I don't think saying like, hey, let's pump the brakes on Kyle Phillips as a 3rd rounder, a guy who could sneak into day 2 and put him back where we think he belongs.
Can I put something in here on the Kyle Phillips?
Crazy.
I think it helps your argument for Kyle Phillips. I have him and Khalil Shakir graded exactly the same. They have the exact same grade for me.
Oh, see, I had Khalil Shakir way higher.
I have them. They're everything they did. It all boiled out to the same number, right? But because of how Shakir tested, I have Shakir ranked higher. Even though their grade is exactly the same, it's ranked higher. And that's kind of the point of this. It's if all things equal, if tape is equal and you see those two as the same cat, what does the testing do for you? Does it push the needle positively or negatively? And for Phillips, it was negative. Does it mean he's undraftable? No. But it means that he's now going to come in lower than Shakir for me. And I think that's the point with the combine. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's what the most recent piece of the puzzle was for us that was unveiled. So we're talking about it. We're putting a lot of stock into it right now because it's what's happening.
And two, like when you see a guy on draft day and you're like, whoa, that guy went 2 rounds higher than I thought. It's typically not a guy with a 4 RAS. It's typically a guy with like a 9.98 RAS. Right. Those are typically the guys where you're like, whoa, they went where? Troy Anderson went in the 2nd round? What? And it's usually because there's some freak athlete that a general manager sees and goes, I can develop this dude. I can turn this athlete into something. I could take this ball of clay and turn it into something too. And this is something that doesn't get talked about because we're not in the room.
Yeah.
You know, I still remember to this day when they did the what do they call those things? The bills behind the scene things.
Oh, bills embedded.
Bills embedded, right? Like that was where Brian Dable and Gabriel Davis's like relationship really blossomed, was at the combine. They just had like, and that's why I don't understand, like the Rams didn't send anyone to the combine. I realize they have like no draft picks. The Jets didn't send their coaching staff to the combine. Like, you're telling me you don't want to have a chance to sit these guys down and work the board with them as a coaching staff? Like, you'd rather like watch tape of free agents. You can't do that in your hotel room, like on your laptop. That's why I don't understand why Robert Saleh and some other coaches like Kyle Shanahan skip the combine. Like, if I'm the head coach of a football team, I'm the GM of a football team, I want to sit these guys in a room with 30 scouts staring down at him, the owner of the football team, and see how they react to that kind of shit. Gabriel Davis, his stock soared. You saw the Buffalo Bills sit down with Kyler Gordon, do board work, Jahad Dotson do board work, Chris Olave do board work. So to me, when Jameson Williams says, yeah, the Bills checked in, I hope to have a conversation with them again soon, compared to Chris Olave, like, yeah, the Buffalo Bills sat me down. They brought out the whiteboard. They asked me this, they asked me that. Like, that to me shows me a completely different set of interests between these two wide receivers.
Devil's advocate, they might not have needed to do that with Jameson.
Yeah, it could be catch up, right? They could be doing catch up work too. So, but they're doing catching up because they're probably super interested in Chris Olave. So, yeah, super interesting. I think we've just about touched on everything at wide receiver now. Shifting over to tight ends, I only had one guy in the red, meaning one guy who I thought had a bad day of testing. And it wasn't even that bad of a day, Jake Ferguson.
And it's your guy.
I told you. I mean, I don't know what you guys.
I still like
why you love him so much. I just don't get it.
I'm softening on my Dallas Goedert comp now because I don't know if he's quite the athlete of a Dallas Goedert, but I still like Jake Ferguson as a TE2, but
yeah,
so many tight ends. I mean, even Connor Hayward had himself a day as sort of a fullback tight end flex. The guy that stood out to me, and I want your guys' thoughts on this, number one with a bullet, Jelani Woods, man. Yes. 6'7", 253 pounds, got a 997 RAS. This is the guy who ran a 4.61 40. He really shined at the Shrine Bowl. He missed, I'm sorry, he didn't miss any time, but he was a quarterback in high school, sort of like Dawson Knox was, came to Virginia. He sort of flashed on tape. So Jelani Woods had himself a day. And then the other guy who, I've been talking to some people back in my good graces after Russ Brown sort of talked him down a little bit, a guy who could go higher than a lot of people think. Daniel Bellinger, man, had himself a nice day. 6 foot
tilt on the victory lap.
6'4", 253, 4.63 40, had a 9.46 RAS.
He is the perfect TE2. And get freaking Ferguson out of here, man.
So here's the conversation I was having with some people with Daniel Bellinger. Daniel Bellinger is going to come in right away, and you know what you're getting from him as a blocker. San Diego State had 5 guys at the combine. 4 of them were Daniel Bellinger, the tight end, Greg Bell, the running back, and 2 offensive linemen, Zachary Thomas and our boy, the Big Mac truck. I forgot his name because he tested so poorly.
Bill
Dunkel. Like those guys, because San Diego State knows how to run the football, right? So you have a guy in Daniel Bellinger who did mostly blocking, right, in his time at San Diego State, and pretty darn good at job at blocking at 6'4", 253. On top of that, now he's not Tommy Sweeney, right? Tommy Sweeney was like a low RAS guy. Daniel Bellinger is a straight up athlete at a 9.46 RAS. You get Daniel Bellinger into your system as a TE2, you know what you're getting him from as a blocker in 12 personnel. And over the years, you can groom him to become a better wide receiver and let that athleticism show. Because one of the reasons why Daniel Bellinger might have not stuck out to Russ Brown at the Senior Bowl or been pushed around a little bit is just because he doesn't know how to use that athleticism. He hasn't been coached right at San Diego State. He's just been asked to do the blocking type of stuff. So a guy like Daniel Bellinger, to me, off the charts, he had himself a day. But Dave, maybe speak more to Bellinger if you want, or any other guys that stuck out to you.
I'll talk about Bellinger in relation to Jelani Woods, right? Because I think that what we have now is a situation where if Bills fans were kind of maybe fawning over Jelani Woods and thinking that he could be a guy that you maybe get early day 3, those dreams may be out the window now based on Woods' testing, right? He could become a day 2 guy now. Right. And so what's your contingency plan? I still think Woods will get drafted well ahead of Daniel Bellinger, but Daniel Bellinger now becomes a very intriguing high ceiling second option should you miss out on a Jelani Woods who got all the attention, rightfully so, while everyone's looking at Jelani Woods over here. Maybe the Bills can look at Daniel Bellinger over here while no one else is looking at him. I know that's not really going to happen, but what I'm saying is based on the RAS and based on how he tested, and we knew how he was at blocking at San Diego State. And I really did go back and enjoy watching some of those games with him, just watching him block and because they were not a good team, right? I mean, they just weren't, but he stood out as one of the better players on the field every time they played. I wouldn't mind, again, maybe a mid-day 3 pick on a Daniel Bellinger. I think it's worth it based on his ceiling he has. Because if you look at some of the RAS from some of these other guys, right? Your guy Jake Ferguson, 5'8", Cole Turner, 6'8", right? Some of these other guys actually don't have RAS in here yet, but like he for where you're going to get him versus where he's tested, I think it's a sweet spot for the Bills potentially.
Yeah. Your boy Lettuce came with a super chat. He said, how many San Diego's? I said 5, but I only named 4 of them. I named Dunkel, I named Thomas, I named Bell, and I named Bellinger. The other guy is Matt Ariza, the punter. We're going to talk about him at the end. We got him, your boy. Don't worry. We will never forget the punt god. But you mentioned it, right? Like Daniel Bellinger, you said like middle of day 3. I'm starting to get the vibes from, again, like when a guy is drafted way sooner than you think, you're like, what? And then you look at the RAS, and typically the RAS is like 8+.
Could be.
Daniel Bellinger could come off the board in the 4th round. It wouldn't shock me.
No.
Right? But when guys like Daniel Bellinger come off on the board, guys you thought a month ago or 2 months ago would have been 4th round picks, all of a sudden become 6th or 7th round picks. Like Charlie Kolar could be sitting there in the 6th, 7th round because of some of these other guys who are rising. Which if you would have said to me January 1st, hey, Charlie Kolar is going to be a 6th or 7th round pick, I would have looked at you like you're an idiot. And I think Randy's laughing at me now, but because Randy loves Charlie Kolar, but like the more of these guys, like Chika Konkwu had a big day from Maryland, Austin Allen from Nebraska, Curtis Hodges from Arizona State. They all tested off the charts. Peyton Hendershot from Indiana's got some off-field stuff. He's got to get settled in some of the interviews. All of these guys are rising. Greg Dulcich, who is Daniel Jeremiah's number 1. All of these guys have risen over the past few months as we've gone further and further along in the process. The names I'm seeing dropping are guys like Charlie Kolar, a guy like Cade Otton. Cade Otton hasn't been talked about yet because
I still like Cade Otton. I still like him.
Jeremy Ruckert didn't test. Jalen Weidermeyer only did a couple of drills. Weidermeyer looked good in the drills though.
Yeah, he did.
I think Jalen Weidermeyer made himself some money. Like there are some teams I know he didn't test. He didn't do any of the testing stuff. Jalen Weidermeyer could come out at his pro day, test off the charts, and a guy like Jalen Weidermeyer could really make himself some money as well. So it'll be super. Maybe Jake Ferguson will be sitting there in the 6th round for Buffalo Bills. Maybe Jake Ferguson. I still got hopes for Jake Ferguson. All right, on to the offensive line now. I want to talk about the interior mostly. If you want to throw a couple of tackles in there, you can. I'll tell you what. I mean, and they've said this before. This draft class is so deep. And it's really nice to me. Like we've had this conversation on the show where sort of a guy like Darian Kennard tested at like a RAS of like a 3. Like it was a really low RAS for a guy like Darian Kennard. I think these 330-pound dudes are off the board for the Buffalo Bills, especially with Aaron Cromer on board. I'm starting to hone in on those guys in the 300 to 315-pound range. Those 6'3", 6'4" guys. I'm seeing really good scores from Zach Tom, Luke Wattenberg, Dawson Deaton, Luke Fortner, all of those guys. Those are guys that I'm starting to hone in on deep, man. I mean, the RAS scores were off the charts for these offensive linemen, both tackles and guards. The Buffalo Bills could have starting caliber players. It might take a year or two, but starting caliber players all the way through this draft. Like Kellen Deesh is not a fit for the Buffalo Bills. He's very much a smaller, thinner framed pass blocking left tackle. He's going to be a fit for a lot of teams. Probably not the Buffalo Bills. He tested off the charts. The guys are testing off the charts everywhere. We're going to get to Randy's guy in a second, Cam Jergens, but just the offensive lineman tested off the charts. Who are some guys that stuck out to you, Dave?
Well, I mean, I got to put the guy on the graphic, right? My guy from NC State. I mean, set the record, right, for offensive linemen. I forgot which drill it was specifically, but I think he set the record for offensive linemen drills. But as far as who stood off the charts that's realistic for the Bills, I mean, Zion Johnson obviously did more than check the boxes in my mind. Yeah. I mean, the huge RAS, nearly a 10 RAS, over a 9.5. Did the 32 reps on the bench. The 4.46 shuttle, still had the 32-inch vertical, which I believe was the highest of other than Zach Tom. He was the highest interior offensive lineman on the vertical. Not that that matters really for offensive linemen, but man, the bench, like just the overall testing for Zion, it matches what you were seeing from him. It matches sort of what you expected from the work ethic standpoint. And so Zion Johnson to me has now become kind of the complete package that however free agency shakes out, right? Like if the Bills if the Bills do something, go out and like, I don't know, sign a Sidney Jones, right? And they bring in 2 interior defensive linemen in free agency, and they go out and, maybe they decide they want to keep Cole Beasley. Like all of a sudden Zion Johnson becomes an option for the Bills. And to Randy's point, he may not even make it to 25 at this point, but it's a numbers game, right? As we've always said, and someone is going to make it to 25. Why not Zion Johnson? And so he more than checked the boxes for me at the combine. And I mean, as far as a few other guys, I thought Ed Ingram acquitted himself well at the combine. I think I would say he checked the boxes. I don't know that he did more than he needed to, but he checked the boxes for sure. And I mean, a couple other guys that probably aren't now on the Bills' radar, like Sellier and a few others did. But for me, Zion Johnson, Ed Ingram, these are two guys based on their size profiles, like you mentioned, Steve, that 300 to 320 pound range. To me, like they should be guys that are on the Bills' radar, depending on what happens in free agency.
Yeah, Sean Ryan here was mentioned by Dave Arizi. He's always been a favorite of mine. He quit himself quite well. Kendall, who were some offensive linemen who stuck out to you at the combine?
I mean, top of the list right now at guard is Cole Strange. Cole Strange came in with a 9.95 unofficial RAS
day
right
two
now.
Pick, I think at this point. There's so many people.
He made himself some money. I want to find myself some Chattanooga tape. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I need to find it.
He's a good fit. He's a good fit, too.
And yeah, that's the thing. He played some center at the Senior Bowl. All I know off of him is Senior Bowl and measurables, but I liked him at the Senior Bowl. He was very competitive. You could tell he was kind of a thinner, lighter dude, but he competed. Like he really has some strength despite only testing or measuring to 307 pounds. But then he only measures at 307 and he runs fast. He jumps high. He jumps far. He can do the agility stuff quickly. When you're that light at an interior offensive lineman position, you better make sure you're athletic enough to match it. So that's why I thought he checked a lot of boxes. Also, you look at a guy like Mitch Morse, who is kind of light for an interior offensive line position. Is Cole Strange the successor to Mitch Morse in a few years? Can he plug and play at guard for now and then move over to center in years to come? So Cole Strange is someone I definitely want to find some tape on, and he's definitely someone I am interested in. Chris Paul is someone I thought was really interesting. Dude ran fast for 323 pounds.
4-position flex, left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard. It's also,
for what it's worth, I don't want to see him ever play tackle. I charted a Tulsa game. I charted a Tulsa game where he was playing tackle, and I charted him for 4 pressures allowed. So I never want to see him play tackle in my life. I think he's suited to play guard at 323. He's got long arms for 6'3", 323. But I just think the way he moved for that size, you want to find a way to get him pulling as much as possible. His 20-yard shuttle was a little bit suspect, below the 50th percentile. So that's definitely upsetting. You want to see that shuttle be high for these offensive linemen. You want to see their change of direction skills definitely above the 50th percentile. And that's why I'm thinking Mr. Kenyon Green lost himself some money this weekend. He didn't even do the 3-cone, and he tested below the 10th percentile in the 20-yard shuttle.
I don't think any team is going to see him as a tackle.
No. I think he's a guard.
I think he played himself into the interior. He probably played himself into the second round. Kenyon Green. I'm just looking here at some of the names that I highlighted. I looked for a RAS over 7 and people in the 6'3" to 6'5" range at like 300 to 315. Obviously Zion, but Alec Lindstrom, who is a guy who I'm not the highest on at Boston College, 6'3", 296, but he's a zone blocking center. Cole Strange, Luke Fortner came in with a 6 RAS, which is A-okay with me. My comp for Luke Fortner is Brian Allen from the Rams, who had a 4 RAS, taken in the 4th round by the Rams, and then their starting center, Ed Ingram, Dylan Parham, Cam Jergens from Nebraska, nicknamed Beef Jerky, gotta love it. Yeah, Jatir Carter from Southern, I love his movement. Dawson Deaton, Zach Tom, and Luke Wattenberger. But I'm going to go back to Cam Jergens. I think Cam Jergens played his way into a high day 2 selection. There are a couple of people that were talking about Cam Jergens where, like, hey, if you lose out on Tyler Linderbaum, you can go get Linderbaum light in the 2nd round. Right. There was a lot of buzz around Cam Jergens from Nebraska at the Senior Bowl, or I'm sorry, not at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine. I think Cam Jergens, probably under the radar, had one of the biggest weekends for offensive linemen. I think he played his way up into day 2. I think people are going to be shocked when we're in the 40s or the 50s and Cam Jergens goes off the board because he's like a day 1 starting plug-and-play center. A guy like Cam Jergens, if he's still around in the 3rd round, I'd be super interested in him for the Buffalo Bills as a guy to come in and play guard. you know, and then eventually take the place of Mitch Morse. But don't sleep on Luke Wattenberg from Washington. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. A little light for my taste at 299 he weighed in at, but a 9.1 RAS, just a really good player from the University of Washington. All right, on to the defensive side of the ball now. Edge rushers. Woo, some guys made some money. I think the biggest shock to me was when they said Trayvon Walker was going to be a top 5 pick. That threw me for a loop a little bit. But
what do you think now, though?
Yeah.
I still think it's high, but I think it's going to happen. I think Trayvon Walker played his way into the top 15. Jermaine Johnson was a freak. We were all expecting it. Aiden Hutchinson lived up to the hype, had some really good agility numbers. David Ajabo, Boy Mafi with a 9.9 RAS, a little bit older of a prospect. I didn't realize he was sort of like a redshirt senior, so he was a little older. I didn't realize he was on the older side.
Who cares?
And he's still, but he's still playing. He's still playing into his athleticism at that age, which is a little concerning, but I like him. Sam Williams made some money with a 9.53. I know he's got some off the field stuff he's dealing with. Kayvon Thibodeau, everyone just wants to shit talk about him off the field, but on the field, he just keeps out doing his job. George Karlaftis checked the boxes. Amari Barno really popped with that 4.36 at 246 pounds. Like, holy shit, Amari Barno. But I don't know, Dave, what was your thought on the edge class? It doesn't even have to be some of these top guys, because obviously Trayvon Walker, George Karlaftis, Aiden Hutchinson, and David Ajabo, like Karlaftis is starting to look like he might get there to 25, but some of these other ones aren't. But who are some guys that stood out to you? It doesn't obviously have to be some of these top guys.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was like, we did our little snake draft, right, on Thursday, and I said I was interested in seeing what Cam Thomas was going to do, at the combine, and obviously, didn't do all the testing, but 24 reps on the bench, pretty solid. Came in, weighed in at 267, which if you're archetyping the Bills,
that fits.
The Bills' size that they look for an edge, like he's right in that wheelhouse. So, like Cam Thomas to me isn't a guy that really, his stock to me didn't change right from what he did at the combine, because he didn't really do a ton of testing. And then of course, my draft crush, I guess you could say, of the edge class, who I've been on for a while, D'Angelo Malone, again, didn't do a ton of testing, but that 41-inch vertical and a 23 reps on a bench came in. He actually weighed in higher than I thought he was going to weigh in at. He weighed in at 243. I thought there was a chance he might be in the 230s. So he's certainly on that lower end. I mean, Jerry Hughes Jerry Hughes is the lightest pass rusher the Bills have had, for a decade, and he's been like 255, right? That's kind of been his playing weight. So D'Angelo Malone's still coming in over 10 pounds less than Jerry Hughes. Like, it's probably not going to happen, but it was just fun watching him, right? It was fun watching him in the vertical. It was fun watching him do the bench. He's a guy I would love to find a place for, but Cam Thomas to me and Malone, I just liked watching those guys. It was nice to see them in person doing some drills and doing some of the testing. So those two guys, I'm, again, not sure that their draft stock changed a ton, but I don't think they hurt their cause, even though they didn't do the full battery of testing.
Yeah. Eric B comes in real quick. He says, you think that Nwosu report is legit on the topic of defensive end? 100%. Ryan Talbot did a great job in the article that he wrote for, NY Up, about how Nwosu was a pre-draft visitor for the Buffalo Bills in 2018, the same draft class as Josh Allen. He ended up going in the second round, which is probably too rich for the Buffalo Bills blood. But I went back and I looked at some of the guys who were pre-draft visitors. I think these are some names in free agency that you could see the Buffalo Bills, show some interest in. The Buffalo Bills showed interest in Nwosu before, and he's done nothing to maybe dissuade the Buffalo Bills. Like a couple of guys they met with, like one of them was like Duke Dawson, like out of the NFL. Another guy that they met with is like in the CFL now. But if you look at some of these other guys they met with, I'm pulling up the list right now. These are all guys who visited with the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk more about this on Thursday. Guys who visited with the Buffalo Bills 2018 in the pre-draft process who are free agents this year. Nwosu is one of them. Doris Armstrong from the Cowboys is another edge player. Harold Landry is another edge player. Dante Jackson is a corner who's going to make some money this season. Josh Jackson is maybe a value corner, a guy the Bills might try to bargain bin, who's a free agent because he didn't really work out in Green Bay. DJ Chark coming off that injury, Rashad Penny. There are even some linebackers in there, Leighton Vander Esch and Rashawn Evans. So there are some guys that could be some free agents the Buffalo Bills try to hone in on, because it's clear that they had some interest in those guys when they were coming out of the draft. So that interest might carry over to their first contracts as free agents. But back to the defensive ends here. Kendall, who were some defensive ends who made some money to you, stuck out to you, or some guys who did the opposite? You were a little upset with some of the numbers that you saw.
So I got 3 guys that I want to talk about. First one is Sam Williams out of Ole Miss. He was not someone I was very aware of coming into this, but I watched that 40 time and I saw that unofficial 1.61 10-yard split. 1.61. That puts him in the 92nd percentile. If you guys were watching and you heard Daniel Jeremiah like rattling off those 10-yard split thresholds for what the top 5 guys at this position usually have, 1.61 was above that, was better than that 10-yard split for edge rushers. So Sam Williams is someone I want to look into. He's got average arm length for the position. He's 261 pounds, 6'3". He jumped out of the roof, both broad jump and vertically. So he had a great day. I thought he definitely earned himself some money, and he earned himself some film time from me. I got to look into him.
That's the biggest reward.
I know, right? Kendall Mirsky's eyes. And then who is the other one? Josh Pascal. Josh Pascal was someone who I kind of pigeonholed as one of those Brandon Beane power rusher kind of guys. You know, he's someone he's a bigger body. He's someone that could fill the Quentin Jefferson role, that kind of thing. He shows up. He weighs in at 268 pounds, which is on the heavier side. It's not crazy heavy, but when you look at the Bills' archetypes in terms of Brandon Beane's time in Carolina and Buffalo, the average weight is 265, so 268 is technically above average. And he tested really well. He had a 4.77 40-yard dash, which is 75th percentile, and his 10-yard split was 1.62 unofficially, which is 90th percentile. And on top of that, his explosion grade was great. He had a 37.5 vertical and over 10-foot broad jump. So that tells you that he can get off the ball quickly. Another guy earned some film time for me. I got to look into him more. So I'm really excited to see if those explosion grades and that first step explosion in the combine is going to translate to the tape. So that's something I'm interested in. He ran the loop pretty well in that figure 8 drill. Him and Sam Williams both did. So that's encouraging, especially for Pascal, who's more of a power rusher type, at least in terms of archetype. He does have some shorter arms, which could be a problem in terms of like bending around the edge and keeping guys off you as a power rusher. But we'll see how it looks on tape when I get to it. Last guy I want to talk about is Maijai Sanders. Really unfortunate. Apparently he was sick, couldn't hold food down, weighed in at 228 pounds. I was expecting him to weigh in pretty light, like in the 240s. But when I saw 228, that was rough. And the problem with it is he tested out well. Like he did. He tested well in everything he did. But everything has an asterisk now because he was 228. You know, it's easier to run fast when you have 15 less pounds on you. It's easier to jump higher with all of this stuff. So now I'm looking to the pro day with him because I love his tape. He's someone I've done a ton of film work on. But now I need these boxes checked another time because I just feel like everything that he did was an asterisk.
Back to Josh Pascal, my comp for him was Jonathan Franklin Myers, is sort of that like power edge. But somebody said Shaq Lawson, and that kind of stuck with me. He's got that body type of a Shaq Lawson, so I thought that was a nice little comp for Josh Pascal. Going back to my guy Boye Mafe, I really like Boye Mafe. Obviously, his 9.9 RAS was exactly what I was expecting. Kent Lee Platt said he thought he would push a 10, and he sure enough, he pushed a 10. And despite the fact that he was everything I expected and more, I still am souring on Boye Mafe just because I think he might be a guy who needs to stand up most of the time. I'm starting to think that he might be a guy who can't really put his hand in the dirt. I'm not saying like it's not possible, like, and he can't be a good edge rusher with his hand in the ground. I just think like for him to be the best version of himself, he might have to be like Von Miller. He might need to keep that hand, off the ground when he rushes from the edge. So I still like Boye Mafe. I just don't know about his fit for the Bills. I mentioned Amari Barno. Buffalo Bills have done a lot of work on Virginia Tech, sort of that 6'5", 250 pound, sort of edge rusher / like Anthony Barr-ish type of linebacker, because they don't have a full repertoire of moves. They're more athlete. They were asked to drop into coverage a little bit. I was like, yeah, you can get a guy like Amari Barno in this on day 3 who you can turn into like a Daryl Johnson ace special teamer and maybe turn him into like a pass rush specialist. But Amari Barno at 6'4.5", 246 pounds, running a 4.36 40, 37-inch vert, the 10 broad, 9.73 unofficial RAS. He's a guy who's going to get overdrafted now. Like, and he had some good tape from his previous years too. So I sort of transitioned now to a guy like Jeremiah Moon from Florida. Similar measurables, 6'4.5", 250 pounds. He ran a 4.76 40, so slower, but he's more of like that like long sort of edge who you could sort of develop as a pass rush specialist and maybe get some special teams pop out of. So just looking for some guys maybe in the later rounds. But the one guy that stood out to me outside of Maijai Sanders that I had a red grade on was Jesse Lucetta. Someone mentioned that he got hurt.
Yeah, he pulled up on the 40.
Okay, because I was going to say he did quite a bit of tests. So his 4.89 is because he pulled up.
Yeah.
Damn, and they counted that number.
He definitely stumped. Well, I mean, he's gonna run again at his pro day. It's just what counts, Okay. He pulled up, like you could see, kind of stumbled a bit in the first like 15, 20 yards or something like that, and then he really pulled up at yard like 30, 35.
I'm just gonna erase his number then, Dad. I feel bad for the guy. Jeez.
Yeah, it's tough. I feel so guilty because I literally I DM'd with him and I wished him luck for the combine, and then I saw it happen and I was like, oh God.
Because like he gives you sort of like those Lorenzo Alexander vibes where he's like a bigger guy and you kind of don't know where he fits.
He's very versatile.
Yeah, but he's very versatile. Randy says, what do you think about Nagbury? He had a very average combine. I mean, looking
the
at
10-yard split concerns me. I'm when I watch the tape, I am going to look to check the box of first step explosion. He didn't run as fast as I thought he would, and now it seems like he's going to have to win with power, which he did do a lot at the Senior Bowl. Like he was determined to bull rush through people.
Interior defensive line. I was really happy that John Ridgway and Neil Farrell Jr. tested poorly. Neil Farrell with a 1.31 RAS, Ridgway with a 4.6 RAS. I'm happy with that because if we don't get our guy early, I would love to just get those pluggers later on the draft. And Farrell and Ridgway are my two favorite. Thomas Booker, I thought really popped with some of his testing numbers, and obviously Travis Jones worked their way into the first round. Jordan Davis worked his way into the first. I'm speaking on my ass now. Travis Jones worked his way into the first round conversation. Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis kept themselves there. My biggest concern is I don't know if the Buffalo Bills pull the trigger on defensive tackle at 25. Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Travis Jones are looking like they're probably not going to be on the board. Perrion Winfrey probably won't be on the board either. That sort of leaves DeMarvin Leal, who I don't like because I don't like his tape, and Phidarian Mathis on the board at pick 57. I did a mock draft today where I gave the Bills Phil Mathis at 57. I like it. I like the player. I think he's a perfect fit for the Buffalo Bills and what they want to do. I struggle because I don't know athletically if I like using a second round pick on a guy like Phidarian Mathis. Kendall, speak to me. Like, would you obviously you'd rather have him in the third round, but is he a good enough player to use at pick number 57?
I think it screams need. It screams, the Bills only have, even if they re-sign Harrison Phillips, what do they have? 3-4 guys in that room. They need another guy. And he's someone that could contribute day one. Would he be the starter in that rotation? Probably not. But he would be a heavy contributor on day one. I have a lot of confidence in his floor. All of my questions are about his ceiling. How high is that ceiling? I think he has a moderately high ceiling, but I don't know how high it goes. And that's my biggest concern with him. But you can see the floor is there. Dude works super hard, plays with great leverage, great hand usage, good power for his size. He's not like a huge, he's
Captain.
A leader. You can tell he's all about it. And I think he would fit everything the Bills are doing on defense and just culturally in the building. I think he would fit the team. Yeah, for a while now, I've been on the boat where when I'm mock drafting, I don't want to take him before the third round. I'm looking at the third round when I'm taking him. But with the way that Jordan Davis, Wyatt, and Travis Jones tested, I think he's the best guy available for this position group at 57, which kind of sucks, but I do like the player.
And this is it right here. Claude Puig comes in and says, when you take Mathis at 57 in a mock draft and you look at the guys left on the board, it makes your stomach turn.
Exactly.
But we've had this conversation on the show. We feel like two-gapping is one of the most important needs for the Buffalo Bills because we feel like it'll make Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano be the best versions of themselves, because it'll allow the secondary and the edge rushers to do more things, because it'll allow the Buffalo Bills to use Teron Johnson in those lighter boxes without it hurting them and affecting their ability to play run defense. I feel like defense tackle is the number one priority for this team this offseason. That's why I like going out and getting Harrison Phillips and Taekwon Jones might be awesome, because then you don't find yourself in this situation, right? But it also, like, you go out and you sign Taekwon Jones, but then like Jordan Davis is sitting at 25 and you're like,
you're screwed.
Shit.
You have to trade away that pick or something.
Like, or Devontae Wyatt is sitting there at 25, and even though he's a different player, it's like, all right, now I got a plethora of guys, maybe too many guys. Maybe I've overinvested in the position. So it's really tough. But like, once you get past Fedarian Mathis at pick 57, it's Ridgeway, who had that 4.6 Raz. He's just a rotational guy. It's Neil Farrell Jr. It's Otito Ogbonya, a guy who has some upside. Matthew Butler, a guy who has some upside, but is more of a 3-tech. Thomas Booker, a guy who has some,
I thought Chris Hitton,
Randy's got, 3-tech though. Lighter weight, 305. But that's right in the Bills' strike zone of their archetype. Randy's guy, Wuzurike from Iowa State, I thought had a good combine as well. So it's just going to be super interesting. And just the better Travis Jones plays, it makes it tougher, right? Because I think a lot of people were banking on him being at 57, and I don't think it's in the cards
anymore. I literally did a mock draft today, and he fell to 57 despite all the updates on TDN, and he was still there at 57. And I was just like, I have to do this because if it happens, we're taking him, but it's not going to happen.
When I do my TDN mocks, I run the simulation 3 times. And if the player's not there in 2 of the 3 times, I don't take the player in that round. I did a mock the other day where I took Roger McCreary in the first round, Travis Jones in the second round, and Calvin Austin in the third round. And I was like, oh shit, like that's pretty cool. But it never happened again in my next 4 simulations. Like, it didn't work out that way, at least not in the second or the third round. So like, it's within the realm of possibility. Like, we could be pleasantly surprised on draft day, but probably not. So it's crazy. Eric B says, is Travis Jones or Devontae Wyatt a better fit? I think Travis Jones is actually a better fit, to be honest. I think Travis Jones is a better fit for what the Buffalo Bills need. Dave, what were your thoughts on the defensive tackle class? Obviously, Jordan Davis is just an absolute freak boy. I think he's definitely earned the right to be in consideration if he's there at pick number 25. But multiple sources have said he's secured a spot in the top 15.
And here's the thing. We rewind a year ago, and we're talking about how we like guys like Aleem McNeil and Tyler Shelvin and all these guys, right? And I think it's easy to forget that we were talking about that when we already had guys like Harrison Phillips, Vernon Butler, Star was here at all. Like, we had like a roster full of defensive tackles already, and we were still talking about like potentially taking a 1-tech type guy, in the middle rounds or even in day 2. And now fast forward a year, we are 2022. Harrison Phillips isn't under contract yet. We hope he gets re-signed. Great. Vernon Butler's gone. Great. Justin Zimmer, RFA, right? So like, what do we have right now in that room? It is super shallow. And I think based on what exactly you guys just said, that it makes IDL a priority, whether it's in free agency or the draft for the Bills? So we're talking about combine here. If the Bills don't go out and sign multiple IDLs, and let's say they just bring back Harrison Phillips, which would be great, IDL needs to still be on the table potentially in round 1 and round 2 with how shallow the IDL class is. And Claude said your stomach will turn with who you left on the board, but your stomach's going to turn as well if you look at when you look at what other IDLs are left on the board later if you don't take one in by the second round. So it's all like a, you gotta weigh it out. Obviously, in free agency will provide some clarity there. But in my opinion, the top end of this IDL class is really talented, but it's shallow, right? And that's where I think versus last year, there were a lot of good fits for the Bills at one tech deep into the draft, and they still didn't pull the trigger. This year, there are some fits, but for me, unless you go after a guy early this year, I'm kind of like wondering about like what kind of investment you're going to make in the interior. I mean, once you get down, like Thomas Booker, like Judge, you mentioned him, and I had said that he was a guy I was interested in seeing at the combine, right? And he tested well, like you mentioned. He's now all of a sudden maybe going to play his way into day 2 because of how shallow this draft class is at IDL.
He could be a third round. Him and Matthew Butler could have easily tested their way into the third round of the draft.
So while you're thinking, oh, well, maybe we won't have to take an IDL early. We can get a guy like Thomas Booker in the 4th round. Maybe not anymore. So it's tough because, some of these guys that maybe we were hoping, especially Booker and Butler, they could be day 2 now, right? They could be day 2. And so it becomes an even shallower proposition. Other guys will obviously mathematically have to drop, but you just don't know what positions those are going to be. So it's tough. This IDL, where the entry point is for IDL in the draft is going to be a fun debate, really up until free agency and maybe even after free agency.
Yeah, the way I look at it is actually very dependent on free agency. Like you laid out, like what they do in free agency is going to impact the draft. I fully expect them to get Harrison Phillips. If they get nothing more beyond that in free agency, I'm going to expect them to draft someone in the first 3 rounds. If they get someone early, or if they get Daquan Jones on top of that, then I'm not going to expect them to do anything at the position in the first 3 rounds, because then they're probably going to have to release whoever that non-Harrison Phillips signing is, or maybe they're going to have to pay him more than what he's actually producing on the field just because of the numbers game. So I'm looking for my answers at this position in the draft to be answered in free agency. And if they go the route where they go Phillips only and they try to get a guy high in the draft, but they just can't do it, then maybe we see them add to the group in free agency after the draft.
Big name veteran free agent that I forgot to mention. So at the top of the show, we talked about the Albert Breer report that a big name free agent approached the Buffalo Bills, wanted to talk in Indianapolis about possibly working on a deal. By Chance is actually the one who suggested this in the comment section on Twitter. Calais Campbell has a relationship with Gregory Rousseau, mentor to Gregory Rousseau, with that Miami connection. A guy like Calais Campbell could come to Buffalo behind Harrison Phillips and at Oliver and provide, sort of what we need there in that rotation and keep us from having to draft a guy. So keep the name Calais Campbell too. Yeah, keep the name Calais Campbell in mind as well. All right, linebackers are just fucking freaks. Holy shit.
All of them.
I'm just gonna
really well.
I mean, I love every single one of them. We don't need them, or at least Brandon Beane doesn't think we need them. The 2 Georgia guys. So first of all, on top of the Georgia guys just being absolute freak shows on defense, whether it's Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Lewis Cine, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, apparently as good as they were on the field, you saw them stay late to cheer on their teammates. Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt stayed an extra 2 hours to watch. I believe it was Trayvon Walker, or might have been the linebackers work out. So it just shows you sort of the camaraderie and the relationships and the culture they built up there at Georgia. But on top of that, they apparently all worked the boards, and their football knowledge and their board work was incredible. And they all just blew up their interviews. So guys like Channing Tindall and Quay Walker, who people are like, well, you know, they played behind Nakobe Dean and they played behind Jordan Davis and that giant defensive line there at Georgia. Like, no, Channing Tindall and Quay Walker made themselves some money. A 9.83 and a 9.66 RAS. Damone Clark with a 9.75 RAS. Troy Anderson with a 9.99 RAS. You had Brandon Smith come in with a 10, but I don't like Brandon Smith's tape. Devin Lloyd came in with a 9.33 RAS. And Chad Muma came in with a 9.78 RAS. And Nakobe Dean didn't even work out. Like, holy shit. Like, I'm not even getting to some other guys like Brian Asamoah and, a couple of other guys too. Like, it's absolutely nuts. Leo Chanel, like, and Darren Beavers, who, like, I haven't talked about, like, it's nuts. The linebacking class is nuts. And I can see a situation where some of these guys start to become like the flavor of the month in certain scouting rooms, right? We could be sitting on the board at 57 and like Nakobe Dean or Devin Lloyd could be sitting there. Like, we could be sitting in the third round and like there could be a pretty solid linebacker sitting there just because of like the dearth of the class. Like,
yeah,
it's going to be tempting, man. Like, could you imagine being sitting at the board at 57 and like Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean is there? Like, that's tempting. I think Joe Biscaglia in his mock-off season had the Buffalo Bills taking Quay Walker in the third round. That's tempting, especially if you let a guy like AJ Klein go. This linebacking class is absolutely nuts. And we're not even talking about the later round guys who are probably more in play for the Buffalo Bills. But Dave, what do you think about the linebacking class that just put on an absolute show in Indy?
I mean, it's tough because Tyrell Dodson is an RFA next year?
He resigned.
Okay.
He resigned, actually. He signed a one-year deal.
So he's a UFA next year.
So you literally have no hole at the position right now, right? Like, every single guy you had on the team last year is on the team this year. And unless you cut an AJ Klein, or let's say you cut a Medicaid, like, right? Like, unless you do something drastic at the position, you're full, right? You're full. I mean, could the Bills replace Joe Giles Harris with a draft pick? Yes. Could they replace Andre Smith with a draft pick? Yes. But like, you're full up at the position. Like, are you going to create holes just to fill a hole in the draft? Like, that doesn't seem like a Brandon Beane type of thing to do. So while I love the linebackers, and I love Chad Muma, and I love Troy Anderson, I like Mike Rose too. He didn't do all the testing, but he acquitted himself well for a guy who really isn't getting talked about because everyone else, tested out of the roof. So, I mean, your guy, Micah McFadden, Kendall, like, he didn't do a ton of testing, but he was good too. He was fine from what I saw. Like, there are so many linebackers in this draft class that I like. And it's sad and it's not at the same time, right? It's sad because you want one of these guys. Like, you want a new linebacker. The Bills, we talked about it. They've only drafted 2 linebackers in the Brandon Beane era. It was Tremaine Edmonds in the first round. And it was Voshawn Joseph, right? Who's no longer on the team. That's it. They have not drafted any other linebackers since Brandon Beane's been the GM. And you could conceivably see them not drafting a linebacker again this year for the reasons that I've mentioned, where we just don't have any holes there. So unless the Bills are trying to play like a long game, or they do cut AJ Klein, or they feel in a position where they can get a value for a guy that can come in and immediately replace AJ Klein, then you might not be drafting a linebacker this year, which is sad. But
we got to draft one.
I know, but like, look at the history. I mean, the history shouldn't dictate future, future prediction in all cases. But 2 linebackers in the whole Beane era.
I think Muma. The rumblings.
I love Muma. I love
the rumblings. So the rumblings from the combine, the 2 hottest names at linebacker at the combine were Chad Muma and were Damone Clark. And those are the 2
love
guys.
Both of them.
Devin Lloyd posted a damn like 8.8 something. He had posted a perfectly fine testing numbers. Devin Lloyd, who was the alpha, like the number 1, him and Nakobe D in the class, and he was an afterthought. He was an afterthought all weekend. Absolutely nuts. Kendall, what were your thoughts on the linebackers? And then, Randy's mentioned him. Dave Arizi's mentioned him. I'm going to talk about my boy Malcolm Rodriguez again. One more time. I was on my soapbox the last show about Malcolm Rodriguez, and I'm going to get on my soapbox again. But who are some linebackers that stood out to you?
So I really I can't even pick one. Like they literally tested better than the running backs. That's just the way the linebacker group is going. Like they have to be able to guard these running backs now. So they have to start testing athletically better than these running backs. And they did. They tested outstanding. So it's really tough for me to pick a few, especially with where my mindset is at for this draft. I'm really not looking at anyone prior to round 4. I'm really not. If we're drafting anyone prior to round 4, they better be taking over for Tremaine Edmunds. And I don't believe in that. So I can't really get behind that. So I'm looking at a guy like DeMarco Jackson, who tested pretty well. He's just barely over 6 foot tall. He's kind of on the lighter side at 233, but he tested really well. He ran fast, 4.55 40 in the 94th percentile, had App good explosiveness. Yeah. App State linebackers have been producing. They have been producing. So yeah, he's an explosive athlete, kind of on the smaller side, but this is kind of what I talked about. I think I talked about it on this show. If we're getting a third linebacker, it doesn't necessarily have to be this big thumping linebacker, because that's not really what the NFL is about anymore. You got to be rangy. You got to be able to cover the field vertically and horizontally. And I think based on measurables, I got to look into it more. But I want to look into DeMarco Jackson because I think he would round out this linebacker group when 3 linebackers are on the field. And I don't even know if that's going to happen all that often.
Yeah. Talking about a late round guy, Malcolm Rodriguez from Oklahoma State. I was on my soapbox about him on this last show. 5'11" is going to be the knock on him, 232, but he came out and he had an 8.54 RAS. So a really decent relative athletic score with a 4.5 240, 39-inch vert. This is a guy, I'm reading off my notes here. High school quarterback, 3-time state champ. High school wrestling, 2-time state champ. He moved from safety to linebacker at Oklahoma State, 4-year starter, 3,000 plus defensive snaps over his career at Oklahoma State, 500 plus special team snaps, 300 plus tackles, 7 forced fumbles. In his time, in his 4 years as a starter at Oklahoma State, in those 3,000 plus snaps, 3 penalties. 3 penalties for Malcolm Rodriguez. He had the most tackles for loss or no gain among Power 5 linebackers last season, and he went 430 coverage snaps without allowing a touchdown, the highest amongst linebackers by a mile in college football. Malcolm Rodriguez is a guy you can get in rounds 4 to 7. Who knows where his sort of range is there, because I think teams are going to look at that 5'11" differently. Guy who can come in and replace AJ Klein right away. He can be a special teams absolute maven, replace sort of that Tyler Matakevich role, just be an absolute demon on special teams. And despite his physical limitations that some people might see at 5'11", 230, if Matt Milano ever got hurt, if Tremaine Edmunds ever got hurt, the guy could probably start in a pinch, and he could probably not embarrass himself out there on the football field. Could he ever be an every game starter? Maybe not. But a guy like Malcolm Rodriguez, just when we do the show where our no matter what show and we pick the player, he's gonna be like, if we had a power rank our no matter what, because we pick one player from every position because we're freaking animals, he's gonna be my number 1 player that I pound the table for in this entire draft. Malcolm Rodriguez is a beast. I'm just a huge fan of his. So that's all I gotta say. Fuck Brandon Smith. His tape sucks. I don't care if he's got a 10 RAS. Draft Malcolm Rodriguez.
Can I address something real quick on linebackers?
Yeah.
So Eric comes in and says, is 4.66 from Lloyd a problem for you guys? And I just want to say that it's not a big deal. I just went in and looked at the linebackers that Bean has drafted. Yeah, 4.66 is not a problem. Average is 4.62. And while that's on the slower side, 4.66, you look at some of the recent guys, Matt Milano ran a 4.67 and AJ Klein ran a faster 4.66. So it matters more what you're doing on the field. And I've heard nothing but great things about Devin Lloyd's tape. So I'm not too worried about a 4.66. I'm more worried about, can he hang on to running backs and pass coverage? Can he, run fit correctly, stuff like that. The long speed is great, but linebackers aren't going to be asked to do that all that often. So it's not super concerning, but it is eye-opening for someone that's so high.
Fred Warner's 40, 4.64.
Yeah.
Daniel Jeremiah literally put Fred Warner and Devin Lloyd's measurables up next to each other, and they were pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So like literally a physical comparable for Devin Lloyd is Fred Warner. So if you don't have a problem with Fred Warner's 4.6 speed, you probably shouldn't have a problem with Devin Lloyd's 4.6 speed. So that moves us now to cornerbacks. A couple of things I want to say. I think Sauce Gardner's CB1 in this class. I think he hammered it home. And we're gonna have to have a conversation about Derek Stingley, maybe making his way, creeping into like past 15, and what the Buffalo Bills might want to consider giving up to go up and get a guy like Derek Stingley. That could be best case scenario for the Buffalo Bills on draft day, is if Derek Stingley starts creeping down boards. And we're going to get to that conversation in a second. A bunch of people were all up in my comment section about Kyler Gordon's 4.5 40. Again, you want to compare him to another NFL player, Daniel Jeremiah, put his measurables right up there with Marcus Peters, and he's pretty much a physical comp. Marcus Peters, identical. So not a problem. And thank you for Casey Reed for pointing that one out, because I was not watching the combine when Daryl Jeremiah did that. So thank you, Casey Reed. I don't want him to think I didn't give him credit for what he tagged me in on Twitter.
Got it.
Yeah, so I mean, those are the things that I wanted to talk about. The numbers, there were some guys that stood out, some guys who struggled. Tariq Woolen is going to be something that we probably have to talk about here as a second round option. And we got to talk about the arm length is something we got to talk about here. But before we get into some of those deeper conversations, Dave, cornerbacks that stuck out to you.
Well, I mean, obviously Alante running that 4.36 and getting the 9.79 RAS was nice to see. Maybe made himself some money. Kind of, I think he was already probably pretty much borderline, day 2 pick, but I think he probably solidified himself now as a day 2 pick there. I mean, really happy to see that. As you know, I was very interested in seeing what Monteric would run, because the tape looked good on him. He's versatile playing man, could play zone. I didn't think the 4.55 that he ran really hurt him too badly. He's not really known as like a super speed guy anyway. So I was really looking for him to come in under the 4.6, which he did. So I was happy to see that. Obviously, we're going to talk about it. The arm length for him is, it's up there. It's good. So you like to see that. And Cam Taylor Britt, another guy that we had talked about heading into the combine, as someone we were interested in seeing solidify himself, and he sure did with that 4.38 and the good arm length as well. So
when Joe Marino falls in love with a guy, Bills Mafia typically falls in love with the guy. And the 3 guys that I see Joe crushing on: Cam Taylor Britt, Mario Goodrich, and Zach Tom. Those are the guys that Joe Marino I've seen. Oh, Jelani Woods too are some of the guys that he's really honed in on. So for Bills Mafia that like to make sure that you're staying in Joe Marino's good graces, those are the 4 prospects that you're going to want to keep an eye on. But speaking of guys we had in our watch list, I almost forgot to mention Joshua Williams, my guy, 6'2", 195 pounds, almost 33-inch arms, by the way, not a T-Rex. And he ran a 4.53 and had an 8.59 RAS. So I really liked what I saw out of Joshua Williams. Kendall, what were some things that you like to see from this cornerback class, or what are some things you saw that you liked from this cornerback class?
I mean, there were a lot of guys. I think the big thing really is arm length. That was the big thing that came out. So you kind of just have to cross some of those guys off and look at some guys that satisfy whatever threshold that is. And someone that ran a lot faster than I thought he would and tested a lot better than I thought he would was a Caleb Evans out of Missouri. I watched his tape early on before the Senior Bowl, and I thought he was a little bit grabby, a little bit stiff in the hips. It kind of happens when you're a bigger, longer guy. He's got 32-inch arms. He's 6'2", but he's good in run support. He's solid in coverage, and he has teachable traits, especially for zone coverage. So he's someone I'm looking at when we all know the Bills pass on CB early. He's someone I'm looking at in the later rounds.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I mean, I'm getting so excited for one of these top 6 guys, but it's going to be one of these later round guys. So I want to make sure I highlight some of them. The other one was Kobe Bryant. Judge, you thought he was going to test poorly. So far, he has an 8.1 unofficial RAS. It's nothing crazy. He didn't really run like a great 40, but he also didn't disappoint.
Does he have safety flex? I just want your perspective. You think
he never did? I think he could. He never did that at Cincinnati.
There was a couple of guys that they mentioned having possible safety flex.
I think
they talked about
definitely could.
Yeah.
What were you saying though?
But they talked about Watson from Washington State. They talked about Cam Taylor Britt.
Yep.
They talked about Alontae Taylor as all guys who had safety flex.
Yes.
So I was wondering if like Kobe Bryant fit into that. I know he's never done it, but he did play some nickel at Cincinnati. So I wondered if he had that flex.
I think he could. I think he's like physical enough in run support. I just think with the production that he's had at cornerback, especially playing opposite as someone so prolific like Sauce, you get a lot of targets with people just not throwing to one side of the field, and he's done well enough. Like he's been sufficient plus. So you can't really discount that. And I think with the 40 he ran, it's kind of that sufficient plus. It's like, yeah, he checked the box. He didn't really like color it in completely, but he checked it and he did enough. He has 30-inch arms. He's 6'1". He's 190 pounds. He's strong he checks enough boxes where you're like, okay, if the Bills pass on a couple of guys in the first 2 rounds, he's a nice 3rd round guy that could come in, be productive and compete for CB2. He's not necessarily someone I'm wholeheartedly convinced could win that job right away, but he's got a lot of traits I think that you could work with. He's got a lot of tape that shows he has the innate skills to break up passes and be physical in the run game. So I think he checks a lot of Buffalo Bills cornerback boxes. So Kobe Bryant is someone I'm glad he checked at least the long speed box and that pure athleticism stuff. But I'm looking forward to his pro day because he didn't do explosion stuff, the vertical jump, broad jump, and he didn't do agility stuff, shuttle and 3 cones. So I'm definitely going to be looking forward to his pro day.
All right. So here's something I want to talk about. We're not going to get into the T-Rex arms yet. I want to talk about sort of the power ranking to corners. And here's sort of how I view it heading into the draft. I think Sauce is bona fide number 1 now. I think he's gonna be a top 10 pick. I think he's gonna be a New York Jet. It's gonna make me sad. Then it's Booth and Stingley. Both guys didn't work out at the combine, sort of maybe dinged their stock a little bit. I think there's maybe like a 40-60 chance, like a 40% chance that we have of Trent McDuffie being there at 25. We're going to talk about the T-Rex arms in a little bit, the 29-inch arms. McCreary the same with 28.5. I think there's a good chance both McCreary and Kyler Gordon are on the board when the Buffalo Bills pick at 25. I personally would be happy with Kyler Gordon and Roger McCreary if they were the 25th pick of the draft. I'd be happy with Trent McDuffie if he was the 25th pick of the draft. But if you get to pick 17, I don't think Baltimore is parting ways with pick 14. And I think Philly has so many picks in the first round. I don't think they're looking to trade out of I don't think they're looking to collect more picks, right? So I'm not counting Philly as a possible trade partner, and I'm not counting Baltimore as a possible trade partner. So I look to pick number 17 in the LA Chargers. If Andrew Booth or Derek Stingley is sitting there at pick number 17, I was doing some math here. It'll probably cost us one of 2 things. A 1st and a 2nd round pick where they'll have to throw in like a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick to make it work. So say the trade is the Bills trade a 1st and a 2nd to the Chargers for pick number 17 and a 4th, or the Bills trade a 1st, a 3rd, and a 4th next year. Are either of those trades good enough for you to move up and take a Booth or a Stingley? Are you willing to make that move for one of those 2 guys who many consider blue chip prospects? I don't know, Dave, you're shaking your head no.
Nah, I'm not giving up my 2nd round pick this year. Not with the what we've been talking about the whole.
What about a 1, a 3, and a 4 next year?
You're saying the 1 from this year and then both the 3 and 4 from next year, or the 3 from this year and
3
a 4
from this year and a
year?
4 from next year?
I'd be more willing to entertain that than giving up the 2nd because I just see like 6-7 corners that I like. I see 6-7 wide receivers that I like. I see a possibility of a Travis Jones or someone like that, maybe outside chance of getting there in the 2nd round. I see, an edge rusher potentially being there. Like I feel like the top end of this draft class with the numbers game we've been talking about with like all these guys we like at the top end, like 1st and 2nd round players to me are going to come in and help your team right away this year. And so for me, if I can get myself a Kyler Gordon or a McDuffie or McCreary, plus let's say, I don't know, let's just say Calvin Austin in the 2nd round. I mean, I'm doing that, man, rather than trading up to get Stingley. Like I just am. Like that's just my preference. I'm probably more conservative in nature than others, but that's just me.
I wouldn't give up a 1 and 2, but I would trade a 1, a 3, and a 4 next year to move up for Derek Stingley because
okay, I would entertain that. I would entertain that.
I see the videos on NFL.com of Stingley and Jamar Chase having those back and forth at LSU's practice. And just imagine if the Buffalo Bills drafted the cornerback version of Jamar Chase. You saw the impact that Jamar Chase
had. LSU corners starting opposite each other.
But like it's
never going to happen.
You saw the impact. You saw the impact. And the foot is a little bit scary as Randy comes in here. You know, the Bills talked with Andrew Booth at the combine too. So the Bills have some interest, maybe if he drops. But if someone were to say to me like, hey, you know, if Brandon Beane's confident that Derek Stingley is the Jamar Chase of the defense, right? And he can come in and have a Jamar Chase impact like Jamar Chase had on that Bengals offense, but Derek Stingley can have the defensive version of effect of it. I'm willing to make some moves, right? Like, what do we want? We want an impact player. We want it, but we all want it in free agency. We all want to pay $15 million for it. Why not just go give up some draft capital for it, right? But your boy Lettuce comes in and says, hey, Jamar Chase was shut down by Roger. I'm pro Roger McCreary at pick 25 because, you know, testing numbers be damned. Like when you saw that guy do the quarterback drills and Anthony Prohaska talks about it all the time, his hip fluidity is just absolutely nuts, right? Like absolutely insane. Roger McCreary to me is the real deal at corner. I think he's one of those guys where just like tape don't lie. I don't know, Kendall, what are your thoughts on this trade scenario that I have a first, a third, and a fourth next year to move up for either Stingley or Booth? What are your thoughts?
I'm in the same boat as Tilt, especially this year. I'm usually pretty conservative, and I'm usually team trade down, if anything. I'm usually team trade down to trade up. But I think specifically this year, it's so deep. I mean, obviously we talked about defensive tackle being a really light position, but most other positions, there are guys to be had on day 2 and even day 3. So this year out of most, I don't want to part ways with any of our day 2 picks. And I would love to try and use some of our day 3 picks to either move up earlier into day 3 or to move up extra picks into day 2. So I'm not looking to trade up in round 1. I think if any trade ups are happening in this draft, I think they're happening on day 2 or day 3, especially with the amount of picks the Bills have on day 3. So that's just me. I'm pretty conservative about round 1 trade ups, but I think day 2, day 3, there's a very high chance that Brandon Beane goes for it.
Yeah. A name that I want to talk about that doesn't get mentioned. I think the reason why it doesn't get mentioned, no offense, is because TDN hasn't put this guy on their board yet. Jalen Armour-Davis from Alabama. I mean, came in 6 foot, 197 pounds, almost 31 inch arms, ran a 4.39 40, 9.46 RAS. I think Jalen Armour-Davis is a guy who could work his way late day 2, early day 3. He's a name to keep an eye on. Caleb Evans had himself a pretty nice day. He was a little up and down at the Senior Bowl, but 6'2", 197 pounds, 32 inch arms, 9.63 RAS. He's another ball of clay to work with. Just looking at some of these guy late, Isaac Taylor Stewart from
I really like him.
USC.
Yeah,
6 foot, 200 pounds, 31, almost 32 inch arms, 4'4", 240, 9'5'9" RAS. You know, he's a guy that I really like. You know, the Bills were looking at Elijah Griffin, so they've seen some.
He's
Taylor
a ball
Stewart
of clay.
tape.
Taylor Stewart. I mean, that dude's the definition of an athletic ball of clay right there.
And I want your guys' thoughts on Tarik Woolen. I'm not going to lie to you. I would be upset if the Buffalo Bills selected Tarik Woolen at pick 57. Would you be? What adjective would describe your feeling if the Buffalo Bills selected Tarik Woolen at pick number 57? Dave, what would your adjective be to describe that?
It would in a way kind of remind me, I guess, of a little bit of the Spencer Brown pick, where at first I'd be like questioning it, but then I'd kind of probably come around to it and justify it to myself. I guess it depends on what we do in round 1. I know it's like a cop-out answer, but if we go out and we get like a wide receiver in round 1 and we've addressed edge or something in IDL and free agency, like I'm not gonna be that upset about it. I think I'd be okay with it. I mean, the dude, athletically, like, what can you say? But again, the Bills, this is where they really have to show them that their coaching staff can coach up the CB room like they've proven they can with other other types of profiles, right? Like lower round draft picks, not the most athletically gifted guy. Here's a guy that then you're going to take in the second round that has great athletic ability, but like technically, where is he, right, in the process? And fundamentally, where is he in the process? So it would be an interesting, dichotomy to compare to how they've treated that room in the past and how they've drafted for that room in the past. So it doesn't seem likely to me. I guess I'd be surprised if they went that direction.
Kendall, what adjective would describe your feeling if the Buffalo Bills took Tariq Woolen at pick number 57?
The word I would use is probably intrigued. I'd be intrigued because it's literally the definition of ball of clay. He's so athletically gifted, but you wonder about how those skills can translate to the cornerback position. When you watch those drills, man, like, yeah, he ran fast in a straight line, but he was tall in his back pedal. He was tall when he was trying to flip his hips. It was stiff. It didn't seem natural. There was no fluidity or smoothness to it. And he wasn't even great when it came to like high pointing the ball and trying to show off his ball skills in a lot of those drills. So I guess intriguing is kind of a lukewarm word because it's not necessarily positive, but it's also not negative because I'm intrigued by what it can be, but I'm also intrigued about what it can't be. Like he's got a lot of hit or miss traits.
It doesn't seem like a move a team that's in a Super Bowl window should make. Like it's a team, like it's a team like
for CBT.
Here's the thing: could you say that Tariq Woolen is like the Spencer Brown of cornerbacks, right? Like, maybe he's the guy where you don't think he can compete right away, but he's so athletically gifted. Yeah, and the Buffalo Bills are so good at coaching up, DBs, he can actually make an impact right away. But you're probably also going to see some of those plays that Spencer Brown made his rookie year.
Right,
and
exactly.
Do you want that when it's a cornerback?
Well, and also the plan was never for Spencer Brown to play last year. It just worked out that way. Yeah. So would the plan be for Woolen
The plan is never for a Buffalo Bills draft pick to play with him.
Hey, if he's taking a 57, he better be playing.
Someone mentioned Marcus Jones. I want to pull up Marcus Jones's testing numbers because from what I can tell, that's another guy with the T-Rex arms. Maybe they're not T-Rex arms, maybe they're just normal for his body, but 5'8", 175 pounds, 28, almost 29-inch arms. So for Marcus Jones, that's a concern with your cornerback. If they are a zone corner, you want at least the Bills look like they want the archetype of a longer arm. Some guys who fit the Bills archetype: Martin Everson, 33, almost 34-inch arms. That's a guy who the Buffalo Bills, I think, are going to be really in consideration of. This is a guy who very, very good zone corner. And he looked like he was going to be a second-round pick, but he had some rough games against the Jamison Williams of the world and some of the other better teams that he faced this year. But again, you get him into Buffalo, you get him coached up by some of these coaches here that have gotten some of these DBs to be the best versions of themselves. Martin Emerson could be a steal for the Buffalo Bills in the third round, right? Like
I really like Martin Emerson. Him running a 4.5340 is exactly that sufficient plus I was talking about with Kobe Bryant. It's like, hey, you're long and you're big. You'll be able to help out in press coverage if you have to. You'll be able to help out in run support theoretically if we coach you up. And I mean, that length, like that's what you want in that zone coverage. So yeah, he's not the fastest dude in the world, but he shows some athleticism on tape when he has to play man coverage. So I think the zone stuff is there. It's just, you got to work with him a little bit. He's got some rough edges, but I have a lot of confidence in this coaching staff tilt, like you were talking about with Tariq Woolen. The same kind of thing applies with Martin Emerson. It's just, a bit lesser extent on the traits.
Well, and just not to burst your bubble, but you got a guy that picked at 57 does not necessarily have to play. Look at Boogie Basham was 61, and what AJ Panessa was picked 54.
Talk about those.
And not much playing time. Their rookie season.
Play.
Again, I just want to mention this guy too before we check out our corners here. Like I said, if you're not willing to take the chance on Tariq Woolen at 57, then there's Martin Emerson in the third. Then I think Jalen Armour-Davis, I mentioned, is a guy who, like in the fourth round. Caleb Evans, fourth or fifth round. Josh Williams, third or fourth round. Sam Webb from Missouri Western, 6 foot, 202, 32-inch arms, 4.48 40. He's a real ball of clay. right? Like Missouri Western, that's going to be a huge leap for him as well. But he's a guy you can get in like the 5th, 6th round. A guy like Sam Webb, who could be a real intriguing guy as well. If you pass on some corners, he would probably be there in the Isaac Taylor Stewart range. And then the guy who got a Senior Bowl invite, I didn't like his tape at the Senior Bowl, but he had a 9.99 RAS. So I think you got to throw Zion McCollum from Sam Houston State back in there.
Crazy 40 time too.
6'2", 199 pounds, 4'3", 40. He's only got 30, almost 31 inch arms. Jacoby Durant, I think, had a good day. A little shorter than I thought, 5'9.5", 180.
Yeah, that could be an issue. 30,
almost 31 inch arms, but he ran a 4.3. A lot of people think he's a nickel corner, which that's the issue. Do you want another?
Right.
But late in the 4th or the 5th round, nickel corner could be a problem. If Teron Johnson gets hurt, who plays nickel? So the Buffalo Bills could be looking for another nickel guy too.
Hey,
so
we re-signed Saran Neal, man.
My guy Jermaine Waller did not test very well. I don't want to talk about, but I didn't think he was going to test well. If Jermaine Waller would have clocked, Jermaine Waller to me is like Levi Wallace. I mean,
I was going to say Dane Jackson.
Yeah, Dane Jackson, Levi Wallace. He's a 6th, 7th rounder who a team like Buffalo, he can make a career in a place like Buffalo. But the issue with Buffalo is we're trying to move on past that, right? We're trying to move on.
We are they?
Probably not, but we are.
we as fans are trying to move on. Maybe not so much the Buffalo Bills. So if the Buffalo Bills are just looking to flat out find another late round guy with minus traits, but who can go in and probably not embarrass himself, Jermaine Waller I got a man for you, and his name is Jermaine Waller. Safeties. I think a lot of safeties. We mentioned a couple of corners that could possibly play safety in Cam Taylor Britt, in Jalen Watson, and Alontae Taylor. The thing about the safety class, freakish safety class, right? I want to talk about the depth of this class because there are some guys who are starting to pop for me in the middle to late rounds. And he says Jermaine Waller, 4.68, not draftable. I think Levi Wallace was a 4.67. And
that for you.
In retrospect, I think Levi Wallace could have been drafted. So I'm not saying he's undraftable. Like I think Jermaine Waller is very much draftable. It's just going to be super late.
Levi Wallace, 2.71 RAS and
I think he was 4.67.
6'3". Josh Norman was 4.66. People are slow. If you can play the position technically, it doesn't matter that much. Especially in zone.
I'll tell you what, though, some of these, you mentioned Brian Cook. He didn't really do a bunch of drills.
Of course not.
And there's all these guys who are going to go early, like Lewis Seen, Jalen Petrie, Jaquan Brisker, Kyle Hamilton, Daxton Hill. Those guys are all going to go early, but there are some dudes in the middle of this draft, starting with Nick Cross, the physical freak from Maryland. JT Woods from Baylor, I'm starting to really crush on. Smoke Monday had a great combine. Marquise Bell had a great combine. Bubba Bolden had a great combine. Verone McKinley didn't do a ton of testing, but he's just a guy I like. Tycene Anderson blew up the combine as well. Like there are some dudes in the middle of this draft at safety that I'm falling pretty hard for. And I was having this conversation with their guy Reb Rhodes on Twitter. He's like, well, like we have, Damar Hamlin is one guy. Jaquan Johnson's probably played his way out of being in the conversation forever, taking over for Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Josh Thomas is what Josh Thomas is. It doesn't hurt the Buffalo Bills anywhere between rounds 3 and 5 to take a safety with legitimate upside who can come in and be your safety number 3 and play in case of an injury. I understand the Bills probably like Josh Thomas. I understand they probably like Damar Hamlin. There's nothing wrong with trying to find an heir apparent, a guy with a little bit more upside physically, trait-wise, and all these guys razzed in the 8s and 9s. To me, there's a ton of safeties in the middle of this draft that I'm starting to really crush on. I don't know, Dave, what were your thoughts on the safety class?
No, I like Nick Cross. You mentioned Maryland guy. I mean, not exactly the football powerhouse, but Darnell Savage, a really a safety who's kind of come into his own over the last couple of years for Green Bay. From Maryland, right? So like there's starting to be a little bit of a track record there from that program, putting some guys out. So Cross, yeah, I like Cross as an athletic guy in the middle rounds. It will all come down to what's available on the board at that time for the Bills, let's say in like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. If a guy like Nick Cross is there and it's not a reach and it kind of falls in their lap, like I'm perfectly content doing that. If they pass on someone else or at another position of need where I feel like athletically that player is equally as gifted, but maybe at another position, I might have some reservations about that. However, the Bills are really in a position where they have to kind of play the art of, like Bean says, planning for the future while at the same time trying to win now. So we know draft picks, like we joked about, aren't really playing that much early on in their careers for the Bills. Even the first rounders, right? Greg Rousseau was still in rotation his rookie year. I mean, AJ Vanessa barely played his rookie year, although he was a second rounder. And Ed Oliver was probably the one who played the most, right? But so, okay, if you take a safety in the 4th round, he's not going to play anyway this year, right? So maybe that isn't such a bad idea to have a succession plan with a little more upside for a guy like Jordan Poyer, something like that. So look, it'll depend what's on the board. I'm not against it as much as I used to be, but it's still kind of low on my list of priorities as far as like positions that I'm looking for in the draft.
Kendall, what were your thoughts on the safety class?
I'll be honest, I was checked out by the combine at this point. I was done with it. We got past CBs. It had been 5 days. I was like, I don't really care about drafting a safety, so I'm done with it. I'll check the numbers when they're in. And I'm checking them now. I mean, they tested well. The safeties tested really well, and they definitely, Judge, you have reason to open your eyes on this position now. Like it is understandable.
I love safeties. I fell in love with a ton of safeties last year.
It's what happens. Yeah, we were late to the party, and then you see all this stuff, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of solid guys here. And yeah, it's happening again. I mean, Judge, you said round 3 through 5. I'm still in the boat where I don't want to spend higher than a 4th round pick on a safety, especially now that we have DeMar Hamlin. I think guys in the first 3 rounds can contribute day one. We saw Spencer Brown did it last year, albeit not expected. But all 3 of our first round picks in varying extents last year did contribute to what the team did. And beyond that point, there wasn't a lot. So I would prefer, especially at the safety position, I don't want to spend a top 3 round pick on it because there's no chance in hell that safety is starting over Hyde or Poyer, barring injury. So I don't want to waste a debatably day one contributor on a position that is pigeonholed not to contribute. So that's kind of my mindset on the safety position. There are a lot of great players, but do I want to take one in round 3 when the opportunity cost is a wide receiver that could come in and do gadget work if we don't re-sign McKenzie? The opportunity cost is an interior offensive lineman who could end up spelling Ryan Bates for his job or, could give us reason to try and move on from Darrell Williams. There's so many different opportunity costs when it comes to a 3rd round investment when you're talking about a safety that's going to ride the pine and just play special teams. It's at least for 2021 or 2022, that is.
Yeah, we got a couple. Michelle Holloman comes in and says, my cousin, Jaquan Brisker. I don't know if I'm willing to use a 2nd round pick on the safety. I do love Jalen Petrie. No offense to your cousin, Jaquan Brisker. The only one I had in red from the safety class, I don't understand Leon O'Neal and the Leon O'Neal hype. People kept talking about him at the Senior Bowl, and I was like, I don't get it. He had a 7.87 RAS, but then I watched him in the drills and he kept dropping the ball and tripping all over himself.
It's because he's got that versatility, like Jamal Adams type vibe where he can do a lot of everything, but not necessarily one thing super, super well.
I'll tell you what he can't do. Catch a football.
Exactly. But hey, that's why he's on defense.
Punters, not that any of this matters.
Hey, whoa, your boy is still in here.
Matt Ariza, 4.68 40. Jordan Stout, 4.65 40. Jake Camarda was like fucking flash at a 4.56. Yeah, those punters are athletes, man. It was kind of fun watching those punters run the 40. And I really like their vibe. All 3 of them. And no coincidence, my 3 favorite of the group. Like I went going in, I was like, I like Stout, I like Ariza, I like Camarda. And then the 2 I felt were gypped off were your guy Wright from Tulane and Stonehouse from Colorado State. And sure enough, Blake Hayes and Trenton Gill didn't run the 40 because they're a bunch of pussies. I don't want any part of those 2 punters. If you're not willing to run a 40 at the combine, No, if you don't want to participate, if you are honored, if you are bestowed with the honor of being at the combine, and you don't want to participate in the 40, like Jake Camarda, Jordan Stout, like they were pushing each other. They were being very competitive.
Yeah,
they were going out there running that 40. I liked it. And the other two were just sitting on the sideline. I don't know what they were doing, stretching their hamstring or something. I don't know. I don't like it. Not a big fan. Matt Hawk vibes. Just sitting there doing nothing like Matt Hawk does on Bills.
You just got to drop that name, and Bills fans are like, nope, not doing it.
Your boy Lettuce comes in with the super chat. I always appreciate you, boy. He says, my stupid punter take. Packers with their cap situation, cut Crosby, draft a rise in the third, and ask him to kick him punt. They let Kurt Beneckert hold. Who knows? He wasn't a very good kicker, though.
Crosby had a rough year.
Because Corey Borges doesn't know how to hold.
I don't know, man. I mean,
we'll find out this year.
Yeah, I guess so.
Effect.
All right, so I didn't even realize this. We're well past 2 hours this point.
I know it hasn't felt like 2 hours.
So that was when you tried. Maybe we should have done half and half, but we got to talk free agency on Thursday and Monday. So, ladies and gentlemen, still 150 of you in here. You crazy people. Appreciate it.
Love it.
But that's gonna about do it for tonight. We'll be back on Thursday and Monday to talk free agency. When we come back here on Monday, it's going to be Rumor Mill Central, right? Like it's going to be Gossip Girl up in here talking about who's talking to who. My phone died halfway through the show. I will not be able
guys
to
who claim they don't like gossip, yet we're talking about like who's visiting who and who's talking to who. Like
for what it's worth, my girlfriend loves these shows because they're all gossip. It's about who's visiting who's talking to these guys, what's their psychology background.
Who is sitting outside of Jahan Dotson's locker waiting for him after third period. Anyway, we will be back on Thursday to talk some more free agency. We'll be back on Monday with the Rumor Mill. And then our Thursday show is going to be just like this show. This was our first reaction show of the offseason, reacting to the combine. Thursday show is going to be reacting to the first day of free agency. So Greg and Aaron and Anthony, they get the fun. They get the first night, but we get night 2. So we're going to get the first 2 nights of free agency on that Thursday night. I'm sure Cover One will be doing some specials all weekend long that weekend of free agency as the Bills make moves throughout that weekend. And again, thank you so much to everyone in the comment section. Please smash that like button on your way out. If you could, please, really appreciate that. Share. If you're a big fan of what we do here and the conversations we have, and you think there's someone else in your life that might appreciate this show, share it with them. Let them come in and join in on the Air Raid Hour, the party that is the Air Raid Hour. If you're watching this on demand, leave a comment. We'll make sure we sift through the comments over the course of the next couple of days and respond to anything that you have to say. And if you're listening in audio version, if our faces are just too beautiful for you and you can't stand the sight of them and you have to listen audio only, make sure you leave us a review on whatever audio platform, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever you're listening on, leave us a review or a rating or hit that subscribe. So ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate it as always. And I don't know, gentlemen, any last thoughts before we get out here?
Not really. I mean, we covered so much. What else are we going to say?
Anything else? Final thoughts?
No, just a quick Jabroni Emmanuel Acho, or however you say his name, Acho.
Oh, that was really bad.
Jabroni.
That was real bad. Well, we can get to that on Thursday maybe, but
I'm sure it'll still be in the rumor mill.
I just got one thing to say before we head out, and that's this. Go Bills, and
are we having fun yet?